Chapter 150. 1,000 miles away from Yuyan City, on a mountain peak that reached into the clouds, the lush greenery swayed with the wind. The aura of life permeated the air, accompanied by the lake water that reflected the stars, making the mountain peak appear particularly peaceful and peaceful. A small tomb under a large tree decorated the tranquility of this place. In a manor next to the lake, there was a burst of noise. Some lights were flickering, dispelling the darkness here. When he looked inside, he saw a young man in blue arguing with a little girl in a black and white dress whose wide sleeves completely covered her arms. From time to time, one or two blue rays would float out of the space and collide with each other, creating a small pit on the ground. Wow, so lively. Seeing the potholes on the ground of the courtyard, Jin Wang, who was standing at the corner, could not help but smile bitterly. Yin Nuoxing, who was sitting to the side, also smiled bitterly. The disciples of the Water Divine Hall were required to know how to use formations and be familiar with them. Those with such talent could also be accepted into the Water Divine Hall. The Water Divine King was one of the best among them. He just happened to meet Yi Shi, who was also a formation master. The two of them quarreled as soon as they met, saying that they wanted to use formations to discuss, but in reality, who knew? Now can you tell me why you spent so much effort to move the manor here? Jin Wang smiled. Then, he turned around and looked at the manor. Finally, he looked at Yin Nuo planet and said, not long after they returned, Yin Nuoxing directly asked them to move the manor of the Nine Gods Palace out. Seeing that he was not joking, Jin Wang and the others seriously discussed and really moved the manor away from Yuyan City. They settled on a mountain peak that Yin Nuoxing had dug to bury Yi Shi. There is something wrong with the manor. There's something wrong with that city. This is the conclusion that little Shi and I came to together. The entire Yuyan City has been tampered with. As for what kind of tampering, we don't know. However, what we can be sure of is that this place has been managed by the Yuyan Pavilion for tens of millions, hundreds of millions of years. It's impossible for them to allow others to behave atrociously here. The Song of Death is the best evidence. They can no longer bear the loneliness and want to eliminate some outsiders. Yin Nuoxing said faintly, Purple Night Dark Flame. Jin Wang nodded in understanding. The one who wanted the Purple Night Dark Flame the most was none other than the owner of this city, the Yuyan Pavilion. Yuyan City was originally built by the Yuyan Pavilion. In order to keep an eye on the Purple Night Dark Flame, they had spent countless years on it. How could they allow others to touch something that they had been keeping an eye on? Of course, this is only our guess. We don't know what the Yuyan Pavilion is doing, what they have done, and what they have set up in this city. We can only wait for the day when the Purple Night Dark Flame erupts. Little She also said that I will understand everything here on that day. Destroy the hypocritical organization and expose the true organization. What is this sentence trying to say to us? Yin Nuoxing sighed. Yi Shi liked to keep people in suspense, so be it. Anyway, you would not understand. Oh, Shinran is so obedient to you, but you couldn't get any information out of her. Jin Wang looked up at Yin Nuoxing and laughed sinisterly. Shinran. Yin Nuoxing was taken aback. Seeing his doubtful gaze, Jin Wang was also taken aback. Soon after, he laughed involuntarily and waved his hand. That was her previous name. Now, her name is Yi Shi. I also feel that this name is much better than before. Speaking of which, Yi Shi used to be one of the 8 great beauties of the God realm. If someone were to hear that Shinran changed her name to Yi Shi and stayed close to a young man, I wonder if those people of the same generation as us would be so angry that they would come knocking on our door. Jin Wang laughed mischievously as he looked at Yin Nuoxing. What are you trying to do? Yin Nuoxing's handsome face paled, and he hurriedly hugged himself. He only felt a wave of coldness pass through his body, causing him to feel as if he had been electrocuted. That feeling was just like a little girl who had been targeted by a bad guy. Bang! Jin Wang grinned. Just as he was about to say something, he heard a muffled sound and suddenly felt his head shake. Soon after, he felt the ground on his back. Don't worry. This old bastard is sick. I'll drag him over to treat him. A beautiful woman appeared behind Jin Wang. Her delicate hand covered her small mouth as she smiled at Yin Nuashing. Then a wooden vine shot out from her hand and dragged Jin Wang into the hall. This little guy is called Yin Nuashing, right? That's a pretty good name. If that guy asks you to do something that you don't want to do one day, tell me, and I'll help you teach him a lesson. The graceful and elegant woman that Jin Wang called Little Xian also smiled. Her delicate hand patted Yin Nuashing's head as she followed the beautiful woman into the hall. Looking at the moving figures in the hall, Yin Nuashing scratched his head in confusion. He stroked his long hair and smiled bitterly. Jin Wang is also an old urchin. There's also a little urchin here. Suddenly, a fragrant breeze brushed against his face, causing him to breathe in easily. Soon after, a jade-like hand landed on his head and gently stroked it. Big Sister Yuyin. Yin Nuashing took a deep breath and turned his gaze. He saw Yuyin sitting at the side with a lazy expression on her face. Mei Mao was staring at him in a daze, causing him to blush. Big brother. Ming and Little Purple Soul also came out from the side and jumped directly into his arms, acting all coquettishly. Sigh. Yin Nuashing smiled gently. He felt satisfied. Looking at the two little guys, he felt as if he had really started a family and had a faint sense of belonging. You've been in Yuyan City for almost a year. Back then, you were the one who said that you wanted to go to the Divine Prefecture. If you didn't even get the Purple Night Flame after waiting for a year, I wonder if you would go crazy from anger, Yuyin said with a faint smile. Yin Nuashing saw her sinister smile and could not help but gulp. His entire body trembled as he said, "There's a murderous aura. Who asked you to leave me aside? You left me aside for almost a year." Yuyin rolled her eyes and gave him a knock on the head. She said, "Ming and the others are asking for Big Brother every day. You, little idiot, have been running all over the place. It's not easy for you to come back, but you were taken away before you even came in. Why do I feel like a wife is complaining about her husband?" Yin Nuashing laughed embarrassedly. However, he was knocked on the head again, causing him to scream in pain. Spend some time with Ming and the others when you have time. The two little guys are so shameless, but they just have to rely on you, you heartless man. I'm afraid that when they find a new lover in the future, they will be abandoned by you. Yuyin clapped her hands and sighed. That won't happen. Yin Nuashing rolled his eyes at her. He lowered his head and saw Ming and Little Purple Soul sitting on his lap, leaning against his chest. They looked so peaceful that his smile softened a little. However, it was true that he had not been with the three of them for a long time. He did not even know that Ming had grown taller. Yuyin had also advanced to mortal level 10 extremities at some point in time. Her cultivation speed was even faster than his. However, it was normal that his energy vessel was a crystal. As for Little Purple Soul, it had been almost a year, and there was no change. This made Yin Nuashing's heart skip a beat. He seemed to have thought of something. In the Song of Death, Yishi thought that Yin Nuashing had completely fainted. However, he did not. He still had a little bit of consciousness left. This allowed him to hear every word that the former said before he died. There was one sentence that he was very concerned about. When I was 10 years old, the year when time stopped, now that he saw that Little Purple Soul had not changed at all, he could not help but think of this sentence. Could it be that Little Purple Soul was also frozen in time? But what did this so-called frozen in time mean? Physical age? Or soul age? Mental age? Or all three? What was the effect? Brother Nuo. Just as he was letting his imagination run wild and was about to make him dizzy, a clear voice suddenly rang out from behind him, causing him to set aside his messy thoughts. He turned his head and saw Yishi standing behind him, her small head leaning against his back. He seemed to be able to hear her panting breaths. "Are you done sparring with Senior Water God King?" Yin Nuashing smiled and shook his head. He pulled her to a stone bench and sat her down. His hand gently stroked her head. "TCH, that old man. His level is not even as high as mine. Why did he insist on sparring with me? If it weren't for the fact that I lost my cultivation, I would have killed him with a formation." Yishi snorted and turned her little face away. Yin Nuashing and Yuyin smiled bitterly. After all, this was a formation master. It was natural for his standards to be high. Yin Nuashing smiled and pondered for a while. He looked at Yuyin and winked at her. Then, He put little purple soul and Ming into her arms. As smart as she was, she immediately understood what Yin Nuoxing wanted to do. She nodded and stood up with the two girls in her arms. She smiled and said, "We will go back to sleep first. You guys have a good chat." Yin Nuoxing spread his hands. He would wait until Yi Shi could completely open up her heart. Then they would talk about it like a family. Right now, it was not at that level yet. Watching Yuan disappear around the corner of the hall, Yin Nuoxing took a deep breath. He patted Yi Shi and lifted her up, placing her on his lap. Then he smiled evilly and said, "Little Shi, can you tell me, what do you mean by time freeze?" Hearing this, Yi Shi's heart skipped a beat. Her eyes, which were originally closed in a daze, suddenly opened in fright. She stared at those smiling, pitch-black eyes. There was some panic in the depths of her eyes. He heard the words that came from the bottom of her heart when she thought she was going to die. "Brother Nua, you." A crimson blush suddenly surged onto Yi Shi's face, causing her pretty face to turn completely red in an instant. Even the tips of her delicate ears were covered in a crimson blush. Her wine-red eyes flickered uncertainly. She wanted to escape, but she realized that her waist had long been clamped down by a pair of strong arms. Yin Nuoxing shrugged. His expression alternated between a smile and a frozen expression. In the end, he said with a gentle smile, About this, I want to defend myself. I definitely didn't do it on purpose. But if I heard it, I also... Ahem, don't change the topic. I was just asking about this. I didn't mean anything else. Ahem, whatever it is, I can bury it in my heart." Her wine-red, gem-like eyes carefully looked at Yin Nuoxing a few times. After looking straight into those pitch-black eyes for a long time, Yi Shi finally couldn't hold back the shyness in her heart. She hurriedly pulled his windbreaker over and covered her head. Seeing her shy appearance, Yin Nuoxing couldn't help but bitterly smile. Before he could say anything, he heard a mosquito-like voice coming from his chest, causing his expression to stiffen slightly. Time freeze. Although that's what it says, it's actually a curse. A curse that contains the power of time. I'm not very clear about the specifics. Because of some things that happened to my ancestors, the bloodline of the family I used to belong to contained the curse of time. A portion of people will be born with this curse. When they turn 10 years old, they will be completely frozen. From then on, their physical age will always be around 10 years old. Yi Shi's soft words caused Yin Nuoxing to stiffen slightly. He more or less understood what this meant. The person who cast the curse must have had a great enmity with Yi Shi's ancestors. However, this curse can be removed. This is the hope that I learned during my years of traveling the realm of the gods. If I can ascend to the divine level, I can remove this curse. However, Sigh, I don't think there's any hope in this life. My family has long disappeared into history with the passage of time. With the hope that the curse must be removed, I wandered the realm of the gods alone. After hundreds of thousands of years, I still couldn't get rid of it. When I finally remembered to return home, I discovered that my family had long been reduced to ashes. The only one who survived was me. Yi Shi raised her head to the sky and laughed. Yin Nuoxing saw that there were some tears in the corners of her eyes, which made his heart ache. He couldn't help but use a bit more strength in the arm that was hugging her. Once I entered the pugilistic world, time rushed by. After tens of thousands of years of conquest, I stepped onto the path to heaven. When I turned back, the world had already changed. In the end, I couldn't get back what I lost. Chapter 151. Over a dozen human figures were seated in a large hall located in the northern part of Yuyan City. Only a few strands of divine senses were gathered together in the quiet hall, exchanging some information. The people standing in the hall would occasionally look through the window at the people training in the courtyard. One of them was surprisingly Mu Qing. Beside him was a familiar face. It was Duan Qinghai, who had been defeated by Yin Nuoxing in one strike. The people standing behind the many old men in the hall could faintly see the crazy training of the two people. Ever since they were defeated by Yin Nuoxing, the two of them had been training like crazy. This caused everyone to be a little worried that these two good seedlings would go crazy due to the chaos. Threads of fog lingered within the quiet, large courtyard. They were just like a white-colored torrent that spread through the air. In less than half a minute, they surged into the living room. Those figures standing behind the old man raised their eyes slightly. A stern aura permeated the air. As the fog swiftly surged in, a human figure, whose entire body was wrapped in a gray robe, suddenly exclaimed in surprise. A hot aura circulated as he lifted his head slightly, revealing a somewhat pale face. He frowned as he looked at the fog that was continuously surging in like floodwater at the entrance of the hall. He was initially startled, before a puzzled expression surged into his eyes. His gaze turned slightly, looking at the few people who were standing as he transmitted his voice. "Why is there fog?" The sudden voice caused the few people to raise their heads. They looked at the entrance. Immediately, one of them waved his sleeve gently. A breeze blew the fog out of the hall. He transmitted his voice, "Go out and take a look. Don't disturb the elders." The few of them nodded their heads after the voice sounded. They immediately walked out of the hall and closed the door. The few of them frowned when they saw the fog churning, as though it was about to drown the large hall. A strong wind blew from the body of the person who had spoken earlier. It blew away the fog in front of him. He looked at the somewhat panicked crowd in the courtyard and involuntarily frowned. He cried out, "Why are you making so much noise? Blow away the fog. Don't disturb the elders' discussion." This person seemed to have quite a high position in the Sacred Weapon Divine Hall. Duan Qinghai and the others nodded after his voice sounded. Immediately, waves of Yuan power and immortal qi surged out from their bodies. They were like a whirlwind that swept into the fog and blew it away. However, the fog surged over like a wave. Even though they had a large number of people, they still had difficulty stopping the surging fog. In the sky, the person who had just given the order frowned even tighter when he saw this. His eyes looked around him, only to discover that this place had unknowingly been covered by fog. This place was not a forest. There was still a long time before dawn. Why was there fog here? What is going on? Why is there such a large energy fluctuation? While he was frowning, a couple of figures rushed out from other parts of the large courtyard. They had just asked a question when they saw the fog surging in from all directions. Their expressions involuntarily changed slightly. They inhaled a breath of air, but did not feel that anything was wrong. A gloomy-looking man frowned. He suddenly lifted his eyes and looked at the crescent moon in the sky. An uneasiness suddenly rose in his heart as he cried out in a deep voice, "Something is wrong. Everyone be careful." Bang! Before his voice sounded, his body was struck by a blue-colored fire pillar. The enormous force contained within it caused him to spit out a mouthful of fresh blood. His body was directly set ablaze. Enemy attack! Enemy attack! In an instant, he had turned from a person into a cluster of fire. This sudden change caused the few people at the side to recover a moment later. Horror immediately surged onto their faces. Miserable cries immediately resounded across the large hall. "Seal!" The sharp cry had just sounded when a lovely cry was suddenly transmitted down from the sky, after which 100,000-foot large black energy barrier suddenly descended from the sky and enveloped the entire large courtyard of the sacred artifact, Divine Hall. After which, a couple of fire pillars surged out from the ground with lightning-like speed and smashed onto the bodies of those few people. While they were accompanied by sharp, miserable cries, the wave of fire also caused the surrounding plants to burn. Bang! The blue-colored fire pillar suddenly erupted. It turned into a churning sea of fire that surged out. Immediately, over a dozen figures slowly appeared in front of the shocked eyes of the many experts from the Sacred Weapon Divine Hall, after which a vast and mighty aura erupted without holding back at this moment. Bang! 4 divine underworld experts erupted at the same time. That aura directly caused sand and rocks within the large hall to fly. A powerful pressure spread down from the sky, causing the expressions of some of the experts from the Sacred Weapon Divine Hall to change drastically. Warning! Warning! Everyone pay attention. Call out your sacred artifact formation. This is not a drill. A loud laughter sounded from the sky. Immediately, a couple of enormous formations appeared in the sky. Majestic energy light pillars rushed down and directly slammed over a dozen experts from the sacred weapon divine hall into the ground. The frightening strength left many human-shaped holes on the ground in an instant. Ha! Kill! Over a dozen figures rushed down from the sky. They were just like tigers that had entered a flock of sheep. Those half-immortal and even immortal stage experts could only hurriedly withdraw in shock in the face of this group of brutal wolves and tigers. They did not expect that there would actually be someone bold enough to take the initiative to attack their sacred weapon divine hall. You actually dare to create trouble in the sacred weapon divine hall. You are seeking death. The miserable screams that resounded endlessly within the large courtyard finally attracted the attention of the elders in the hall. Immediately, furious roars sounded out. Soon after, 7 figures that were brimming with killing intent directly charged out from the hall. Their gazes swept across the area before finally pausing on Yun Nuoxing's body. "It's you." Hearing this somewhat familiar voice, Yun Nuoxing could not help but raise his head slightly. He looked at the 8 figures in the sky and snapped his fingers. An energy light pillar shot out from a formation and slammed an expert from the sacred weapon divine hall into the wall. After which he smiled faintly and said, "Elder Feng Yin, we meet again. People from a 9 divine hall, we don't seem to have offended you." Feng Yin frowned. When he heard that Yun Nuoxing was a member of a 9 divine hall, he gave up on the idea of doing anything to him. He did not expect that they would come knocking on his door today. Jin Wang, the 9 divine hall has come to my sacred weapon divine hall in such a big way. Can I ask for an explanation? A black-clothed man took off his cloak and asked in a deep voice. The main character is there. We are just assistants. If we have something to ask him. Jin Wang smiled and waved his hand. He pointed at Yun Nuoxing and said with a smile, You didn't offend us. No one said that we can't talk to you." Hearing this, Yun Nuoxing chuckled. He snapped his fingers and 7 blue pillars of fire soared into the sky, pouncing towards Feng Yin and the others. Feng Yin snorted coldly. He stomped his foot in the air, and a majestic aura surged out from his body. The 7 pillars of fire collapsed inch by inch under his aura. In the end, they disappeared. Aren't you a divine king? Why are you shimming? Feeling the aura that had suddenly become stronger, Yun Nuoxing blinked in surprise. Soon after, he smiled and said, "I'm here to ask for something from the sacred weapon divine hall. If you're willing to hand it over, it's fine for me to leave." Feng Yin frowned slightly. His eyes were filled with killing intent as he looked at Yun Nuoxing. He faintly felt that something was wrong. Seeing that Feng Yin did not say anything and only stared at him, Yun Nuoxing could not help but shake his head. Some sharpness surged in his eyes as he laughed loudly. "I need your sacred weapon divine hall's sacred weapon array. Brat, you're courting death." Hearing what he wanted, the black-clothed man immediately roared furiously. His body suddenly trembled, and his expressionless face instantly appeared in front of Yun Nuoxing. With a wave of his hand, a majestic flame whizzed through the sky like a fire snake and rushed towards Yun Nuoxing. Jin Wang's figure appeared beside Yun Nuoxing. With a clench of his hand, a dazzling golden light suddenly flashed. A large golden hand crushed the majestic flame, after which he smiled and said, "Today, the few of us are here to see if you can defend the sacred weapon array. Bastard, since you're here, stay here." Several divine underworld experts laughed angrily and quickly rushed down. The black-clothed man carried a fierce, murderous aura as he fiercely collided with the gold god king like a meteor crashing into the ground. The moment the 2 sides came into contact, a fiery battle erupted. The wood element is a little restrained. "Littling, you protect this guy. I'll go and help." Behind Yun Nuoxing, the graceful woman's figure appeared like a ghost. She spoke to the space beside her with a smile. "Sisters, go and help Jin Wang and the others. I'll be fine by myself. If you need anything, just call me. Although I can't cripple a Shinming expert, I can distract them for a moment." The moment the beautiful woman appeared, Yin Nuoxing smiled and pushed the two of them towards the battlefield. There, Jin Wang and the others were at a disadvantage due to the difference in numbers. However, it was not a big problem. From this, one could see the fighting strength of Jin Wang and the others. The two of them exchanged glances with each other when they saw his confident smile. They helplessly smiled and nodded their heads. Their delicate waists twisted like a snake and immediately charged into the battlefield. The energy that exploded and scattered had become much more intense. Seeing this, Yin Nuoxing's figure moved and flew down from the sky. Just as he stood on the ground and was about to attack the others, the space before him fluctuated and an old man in yellow robes appeared in front of him with an expressionless face. "You're the wielder of the Ling Hong sword." Yin Nuoxing narrowed his eyes. He felt a trace of familiarity from the other party. It was as if he had sensed it before. "Should I call you Taiyuan Goddess or Yin Nuoxing?" The old man in yellow robes' words caused Yin Nuoxing's eyes to shrink slightly. There should not be anyone who knew his name. Uxian had not been active in the outside world for a long time. King Shengluo? Yin Nuoxing's eyes narrowed. He finally remembered the old man who had been restrained by the 10,000 spirits killing array in Xingqiu City. Their auras were exactly the same. "I'm surprised that you still remember me. The spirit of the divine weapon does not seem to be with you. What a waste of one of my incarnations. However, since you coveted the array of my sacred weapon sacred hall today, you are destined to be completely buried here." The old man in yellow robes' expression was cold, causing Yin Nuoxing's expression to change slightly. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly raised both his sleeves. Blazing flames circled his palms. His palm pierced through the void and landed on Yin Nuoxing's chest. King Shengluo's sudden attack caused Yin Nuoxing to quickly regain his senses. He took 2 steps back unhurriedly. A few scarlet-colored talismans appeared in his palm and quickly merged together. A black array also slowly overlapped with the talismans. Bang! Yin Nuoxing did not retreat. The swift and fierce wind from his palm, along with the black array, directly collided with King Shengluo's palm. When the two collided, a terrifying gust of wind swept out, flipping several layers of the surrounding ground. Walls and buildings collapsed as a result. His 6 wings flapped and stabilized his body. Yin Nuoxing retreated a full 100 meters before he completely stabilized himself. He breathed a sigh of relief. A Shunming elite was indeed powerful. He was not someone he could take on head-on. Compared to Yin Nuoxing's relaxed expression, King Shengluo's expression was particularly ugly. There was a faint trace of shock in his eyes. The former was merely an ordinary ant, while he was a dignified Shunming elite with a reputation. However, Yin Nuoxing was able to withstand his attack without being injured. This caused a chill to surge in his heart. This brat cannot be left alive. No matter how monstrous you are, you will be buried here today. Taking a deep breath, King Shengluo's eyes seethed with murderous intent. Yin Nuoxing could withstand his attack, but he did not believe that he could escape from his hands. "Little Shi, can you kill this guy?" Taking a light breath, Yin Nuoxing tilted his head and spoke softly to the void beside him. As soon as his voice fell, the void beside him suddenly rippled gently. A petite figure slowly appeared. Her wine-red and black hair fluttered in the wind. Yishi winked mischievously at Yin Nuoxing and smiled. "Brother Nuo, who are you talking to? Why get serious? I'm quite powerful. How dare an ordinary ant like you boast so shamelessly?" King Shengluo roared angrily. His hands clenched fiercely in the direction of Yin Nuoxing and Yishi. The space seemed to have been ignited. A large ball of flames bloomed in the sky like a beautiful flower. The scorching heat wave set the buildings below ablaze. "Let me give you a piece of advice. How dare a mere Shunming be so arrogant in front of me?" Laughter rang out from the center of the wave of fire, causing King Shengluo's face to sink. Soon after, the flames suddenly paused, and a vast energy swept out like a storm. It surged out from the sea of fire, forcefully reversing the sea of fire and causing it to slowly disperse. King Xingluo's heart slowly sank as he looked at the black array that resembled a giant wheel. "Old man, come in and fight." Yishi laughed in a lovely voice. With a twist of her small hand, the huge black wheel under her feet slowly expanded. Within a few breaths' time, it enveloped both her and King Xingluo. A spherical barrier appeared, and, for a time, the view of the outside world was completely blocked. "This forbidden array, you are from the Abyss Temple." Within the sealed space, King Xingluo's face darkened as he stared at the black energy mist around him. He could feel that the mist contained a strange energy, and he did not dare to inhale it into his body. Furthermore, the mist seemed to have the ability to disrupt his speed. As the black energy permeated the air, King Xingluo felt that his body had become much heavier and weaker. "Haha, I didn't expect you to know me." Yishi laughed delicately. Soon after, her beautiful eyes suddenly surged with some fierceness, and the smile on her face was especially evil. "Big Brother Nua wants the Violet Night Flame, so I need to borrow your Saint Artifact Grand Formation. As far as I'm concerned, it's best if you can directly hand it over." Hearing this, a ferocious look flashed across King Xingluo's face. He said angrily, "The Divine Artifact Array is the highest secret of my temple. Even the 9 divine temples and the Abyss Temple can forget about getting their hands on it." King Xingluo's cold gaze swept across the black fog around him. He took a deep breath. Then, with a thought, a layer of powerful energy enveloped his body, isolating him from the black fog. "However, you, a god whose cultivation level has fallen, will have to pay the price in blood if you want to eat me." As he shouted, a wave of blazing energy surged out of King Xingluo's body. Then he waved his 2 large hands like ghostly claws. 2 waves of fire followed him and rushed toward Yishi. "Then, you better die, old man," Yishi sneered. Her petite figure also charged towards him like a ghost. The hundreds of spirit designs floating around her collided with the sea of fire. An earth-shattering battle was about to break out. Chapter 152. Far away in the sky, a black space that was thousands of feet wide appeared out of nowhere. Black fog was constantly emitted from it, but it just happened to revolve around the edge of the sphere. It was as if there was a transparent separation around it, and the inside was separated by a strong space power and a magic array. Due to the isolation of the formation, this kind of person could no longer see the battle inside. Even if Yin Nuoxing wanted to use his spiritual strength to scan, he would be bounced away the moment he removed the distorted space. As a result, outsiders were completely unaware of the battle inside. The only thing they could do was to quietly wait for the end of the life and death battle between the two. Then, Yin Nuoxing slowly retracted his gaze from the black space and stretched. He was not worried. In the 2 major battlefields of the gods, the number of people on both sides was equal. Jin Jinwang and the others were much stronger, so they had the upper hand. It was only a matter of time before they won. As for Yishi, she was an expert of the Emperor of the Underworld. Even if her level had dropped, she would still have many tricks up her sleeves. That girl had promised to live well, so she would not do something stupid like seeking her own death. "Let's just clean up the disciples below," Yin Nuoxing casually said. Yin Nuoxing's gaze turned behind him, only to be stunned when he discovered that Yao Hua and the rest had disappeared. His gaze followed the energy ripples and looked over, only to see that the latter and the rest had already begun to fight below. Their wild and violent fighting style gave him a fright. Even Shui Xia and the rest, who looked rather docile, had such a wild side. However, the situation of Yao Hua and the others' battle was also one-sided. Ordinary disciples of the sacred Weapon Divine Palace could not get close to them at all. However, Mu Qing and Duan Qinghai were in trouble. In the Divine Palace, there were also disciples with extraordinary talents. Although the 2 of them were not among them, their talents were also very high. Otherwise, they would not have been able to defeat the former and the others. However, at this moment, Yin Nuoxing did not see the 2 of them, which surprised him. "All right, looks like my opponent is you." After locking onto me for so long, it's time for you to come out and take a breather, right? After letting out a long sigh, Yin Nuoxing's gaze became calm. He gradually turned to the front, where the fog gradually dissipated. After that, a gray-robed figure slowly appeared. This person's entire body was wrapped in a gray robe, and only a pair of beast-like blood-red eyes were exposed. When Yin Nuoxing looked into those eyes, he felt as if he was being stared at by a magical beast that was ready to fight to the death. It made his hair stand on end. Immortal rank, at least the 5th level, or even the 6th level. Yin Nuoxing muttered in her heart as her gaze became very serious. This was probably the strongest person among the younger generation that Yin Nuoxing had ever seen. Furthermore, his eyes were filled with ruthlessness and viciousness. It was as if he was not looking at a human, but a terrifying magical beast. Hearing Yin Nuoxing's words, that person slightly raised his head. His right hand slid down from his sleeve. It was a black arm that was engraved with many runes. As his fingers gently pinched, the strong muscles also slightly wriggled. It looked extremely powerful, as if it would fall apart if it was punched. He slowly took off the hood, and what appeared was a rather calm face. That delicate and pretty face seemed to have a tenacity that was difficult for ordinary people to have. The most impactful thing was that pair of blood-red eyes. Those eyes were like those of a wild beast that was filled with ruthlessness. Sacred Artifact Divine Palace, Duan Yuntai. A hoarse voice slowly came out of his mouth. It was as if he had not spoken for a long time, and his throat was filled with saliva. That trembling voice caused Yin Nuoxing to frown. This fellow, even when he spoke, the air felt a little hot. Yin Nuoxing faintly smiled. One of his hands was behind his back, while the other made a pleased gesture. However, the moment his posture froze, he saw a flash of fire in front of him. A few afterimages appeared in the sky, and in an instant, the youth who called himself Duan Yuntai directly appeared above Yin Nuoxing's head. His entire black arm lit up with a brilliant red light, and those runes seemed to be on fire. A few energy rings appeared on his fist and arm like a rays. The fiery red giant fist was mixed with the sound of intense wind pressure as it whistled over. The wind from the fist caused Yin Nuoxing to fiercely suck in a breath of cold air. Collapsing fist, 5 layers. Yin Nuoxing took a deep breath. His right hand clenched into a fist, and 5 red runes appeared on the tip of his fist. With a thought, 2 arrays suddenly appeared in front of him. They quickly collapsed, turning into energy matrices that wrapped around his arm. The tight feeling of power caused Yin Nuoxing's face to turn red. He spat out a mouthful of hot air, and then fiercely smashed against the fiery fist without backing down. Clang! The 2 fists collided, and there was actually a clear sound of metal colliding. Traces of sparks blossomed, and when the 2 terrifying forces collided, a terrifying sound wave exploded. It caused the blood and chi of the people fighting below to boil, and the 2 figures also quickly retreated. Yin Nuoxing was fiercely sent flying. After retreating dozens of meters in the sky, the 6 pitch-black wings on his back suddenly flapped, stabilizing his body. On the other hand, Duan Yuntai only retreated 2 steps before stopping. Moreover, his posture was still in the same punching position. His mouth was constantly spitting out hot air, and his blood-red eyes were even brighter. This guy, did he forge his arm into a weapon? Recalling the texture of the 2 fists, Yin Nuoxing felt his face twitch. The people of the sacred Weapon Divine Palace were indeed lunatics. They even used their own bodies to forge weapons. That fiery red giant fist contained runes that increased the attack power. If that punch landed, even an 8th level immortal rank expert would be smashed into meat paste. Even Yin Nuoxing's body, which had been repeatedly modified, could only barely withstand the attack with the help of the collapsing fist and arrays. At this moment, there were 2 bright red streams on his arm. The attack power had ruptured the blood vessels on his arm. Duan Yuntai steadied his body and took a deep breath. The ruthlessness in his blood-red eyes deepened. Blood-red hot, immortal chi suddenly burst out from his body and then rushed towards his right hand. In just a moment, the fiery red right arm turned blood-red, and wisps of blood-red flames were quietly dancing on his arm. You want to end this quickly? Yin Nuoxing's expression changed slightly when he felt the enormous energy gathering on his metallic arm. His hands quickly danced, and arrays appeared out of nowhere. In the end, they condensed to the size of a palm. Dozens of arrays stacked on top of the scarlet runes, and blue flames appeared on his hand. Boiling origin energy flowed through his meridians and into his right hand. As the origin energy flowed into his right arm, the muscles on his right arm were stimulated and rose up like small hills. The blood-red color on his red arm grew thicker and thicker. At a certain moment, Duan Yuntai's aura suddenly became violet. His ruthless eyes were so red that they were almost purple. He clenched his fist fiercely in the air, and there was the sound of metal vibrating. Flames danced under his feet, and his figure appeared in front of Yin Nuoxing. His tightly clenched right hand viciously smashed down on Yin Nuoxing. Yin Tian seal. As his angry roar resounded in the sky, a blood-red fist that was 1,000 feet large immediately shot out from his fist. It streaked across the air with a demonic blood-red flame and completely expelled the air. A huge vacuum was formed around the fist, and the blazing energy contained within it caused the surrounding space to tremble slightly. As he looked at the fist that was filled with vigorous energy and blazing wind, Yin Nuoxing fiercely clenched his teeth. The burning soul art drove all the energy in his body and poured it into his arm. As he circulated the burning soul art with all his might, a strange energy surged from the bottom of his heart. However, he did not have the time to feel this new energy. His fist, which had been dyed blue by the array, carried 5 types of elements as it violently smashed towards the fist. Clang! Under the watchful eyes of the 2 parties below, the fist seal and a disproportionately small fist collided in an instant. Terrifying energy intertwined, and then an earth-shattering sound of a bell suddenly resounded through the sky. An intense energy fluctuation mixed with 2 hot fire waves erupted from the spot of the explosion. Fire elements swiftly wrapped around Yin Nuoxing's body and blocked the other party's fire elements. A shock wave shook him until he let out a muffled groan. White smoke emitted from his fist. However, he forcefully endured and did not stop. With a furious roar, he actually threw another punch at that enormous fist imprint. An even more powerful chime of a bell shook the ruins into dust. Yin Nuoxing was also affected by that energy, and he involuntarily spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. His right hand appeared to have gone crazy as it used all its strength to smash that seal. As it smashed viciously like a machine, that seal had become much dimmer. Buzz. Just as Yin Nuoxing was trying his best to squeeze out all the energy in his body to smash the seal, the strange energy that had just been born in his body fluctuated once again. It was like a ripple that spread throughout his entire body, making him feel as though he was suddenly filled with energy. On his forearm, patches of scarlet symbols lit up with a dazzling color. Crack! The strange energy that suddenly appeared caused Yin Nuoxing to be slightly startled. Before he could take a closer look, the fist that carried the scarlet symbol ferociously landed on the fist imprint. Immediately, the scarlet-colored energy unceasingly surged from his symbol to the fist. The 2 enormous forces collided, and a clear shattering sound was suddenly emitted from the huge fist imprint among the numerous wood cantons. Brilliant flame seal. Just as the soft shattering sound rang out, a cold and indifferent shout suddenly rang out beside him. The fist that had just been raised trembled. Yin Nuoxing hurriedly turned his head around, only to see the young man whose eyes were filled with ruthlessness. He was accompanied by a fiery glow as he appeared like a ghost. The huge, brilliant seal appeared in his hand, and it was as though a brilliant sun had crashed into his eyes. At this moment, he only felt that everything around him had become abnormally slow. The fist and Duan Yuntai's movements seemed to have slowed down. That newly born strange energy suddenly surged to every inch of his body, cleansing it. Bang! The sound of flesh colliding echoed clearly in the sky, causing Yao Hua and the rest to be shocked. After sending their opponent flying back with a slap, they hurriedly raised their heads. Soon after, their eyes were filled with disbelief. They saw that the person who was sent flying wasn't Yin Nuoxing, but Duan Yuntai, who was still forming the seal. Boom! A huge fist descended from the sky, smashing into the courtyard with a violent force. It caused the ground to sink a little, and cracks spread to the edges of the array, as though an earthquake had occurred. The faint light particles quickly dissipated, and the two arrays under Yin Nuoxing's feet also slowly disappeared. In that instant, he dodged and counterattacked so quickly that he didn't even have time to react. It wasn't teleportation, nor was it the speed of a light element. It was more like time had stopped at that moment, and Yin Nuoxing was the only one moving. Duan Yuntai's figure staggered in the sky, and he turned his head in confusion. His blood-red eyes dimmed slightly, and he looked at Yin Nuoxing with confusion. In that instant, he felt that he had already hit Yin Nuoxing's chest. The blazing, brilliant flame seal had already exploded with energy, but why was he the one who was sent flying in the end? He gently touched his chest. Although Yin Nuoxing's punch wasn't powerful enough to injure him, it had hit his vital point, causing his breathing to stagnate for a moment. Yin Nuoxing raised his hands and looked at the scarlet runes that had suddenly appeared on his hands. He raised his hands and looked at them carefully. These scarlet runes originated from the soul ignition technique. He had already sensed it when he broke out of his cocoon. However, he didn't know how to use this power himself, as it was difficult to control. But at the critical moment, just now, he had activated it himself. Now he could feel that his soul power and origin energy were burning rapidly, and that power was unprecedentedly strong. Again, Yin Nuoxing grinned and laughed loudly. His feet stepped on an array, and he instantly appeared in front of Duan Yuntai. Duan Yuntai was stunned by his maniacal laughter, and he couldn't help but extend his black fist to meet Yin Nuoxing's. Bang! The two fists separated upon contact, and the two forces canceled each other out in the air. Immediately, the two figures were sent flying again. Yin Nuoxing was only sent flying 10 meters away, but when he looked at Duan Yuntai, he realized that he had taken several steps back. Compared to the result of their first clash, it seemed that the two's strength had decreased quite a bit. Clenching his fists, Duan Yuntai's expression became even more strange. He looked at Yin Nuoxing and couldn't help but spit out a sentence. I might have met a fake mortal. Chapter 153. Haha, how can you judge others like that? I'm a real mortal level 9. When Yin Nuoxing heard this, he couldn't help but laugh out loud. The scarlet runes even spread to his face, making him look somewhat demonic and wild. If one were to use a word to describe his current expression, it would be madness. It could no longer be described as excitement. That wild laughter was definitely that of a madman. If mortal level 9 cultivators like you were everywhere on the streets, the world would be in chaos. Duan Yuntai let out a long sigh and clenched his fists tightly. A violent and ruthless aura gushed out of his body without restraint. The red whirlwind even contained a violent element, causing the disciples of the sacred weapon divine palace below to quickly retreat. They seemed to have realized what was going to happen next. When he saw Duan Yuntai's actions, Yin Nuoxing parted his mouth and smiled. Inside the scarlet whirlwind, he deeply inhaled a breath of air. The berserk factor entered his nose. Just as it entered his body, it rushed towards his brain. However, a silver-white and scarlet-colored energy suddenly appeared. The berserk factor did not even last for 2 seconds before it was shattered by the two types of energy. No matter what secret technique you used, you're just a mortal level 9 cultivator. Duan Yuntai shouted angrily. He slowly reached out his right hand and clenched it in the air. Then, the violent red energy seemed to have received an order. It trembled slightly and stopped spinning. Then, It rushed towards Duan Yuntai's black hand. The violent energy rushed into his arm, making his face turn red. The talisman symbols on his black hand started to shine with a violent red light. Duan Yuntai's face became even more ferocious. Blue veins popped out on his neck like earthworms. Chi! As the red energy drilled into the black hand, the entire arm began to emit white smoke. The space around it began to twist, as if a sea of fire had been stuffed into it. Duan Yuntai's eyes looked as if they were about to spit fire. The way the fire flashed was very scary. Roar! When a last strand of violent energy surged into Black's hand, Duan Yuntai let out a furious roar. That roar did not sound like the voice of a human, but more like the roar of an angry beast. A talisman suddenly appeared on his forehead. It looked the same as the talisman on Black's hand. It was also flickering with ferocious flames. Half of his body was surrounded by flames. His mouth was spitting out hot air, and a strand of flames was spiraling out of his mouth. It's an honor to be defeated by this move. Fake mortal level, Duan Yuntai roared. Blue veins bulged all over his body. His left hand grabbed his right forearm. White smoke rose from the 5 fingers of his right hand. A red light appeared in his palm. As soon as the red light appeared, the heat on his body cooled down a lot. People could feel all the energy in Duan Yuntai's body rushing to his palm. The red light expanded to the size of a head in just a few breaths. That brutal red light shone out, making people feel a violent emotion in their hearts, giving them the urge to kill. Retreat. Being illuminated by the red light, Yao Hua's heart trembled. The light element suddenly broke out from his body and drove the violent energy out. With a roar, the light element was pushed to the limit. In a flash, he grabbed Mu Ling and the others and retreated into the distance. Such violent energy. Seeing Duan Yuntai's actions, the smile on Yun Nuoxing's face became even more ferocious. His 10 fingers were trembling from excitement, and the scarlet runes on his face became even brighter under the illumination of the red light. A similarly berserk energy surged out from his body, and his evil spirit was activated automatically. His long black hair that reached his waist began to flutter, even though there was no wind. Array after array broke through the void, spinning around him like huge gears. Soul-burning art. 3 times. With a low roar from his throat, the scarlet runes on his body erupted with an incomparably intense radiance at this moment. 5 types of elemental energy rapidly surged within his body. Yuan power also abruptly boiled, and the flow rate increased by 3 times. That berserk energy caused Yun Nuoxing to feel as though his body was about to be filled to the brim. At the same time, he could feel that the rate at which his spiritual strength was being consumed had also increased by a lot. Feeling the Yuan Li flowing in her body that was 3 times her original capacity, Yun Nuoxing took a deep breath. The frenzy on her face faded a lot. Fortunately, Xianyin had strengthened her body. Otherwise, her meridians wouldn't be able to withstand such a violent energy. Using the burning of soul force to obtain 3 times the energy. This soul-burning art is indeed a profound technique that only a madman can cultivate, silently muttering in her heart. Yun Nuoxing straightened her mind. With a low roar, she didn't try to control the energy that was rushing through her body. Her hands slowly came together and moved. However, that slow movement left behind afterimages, as if she was repeating the same movement several times in an instant. The Yuan Li that was flowing like a waterfall in her body was like a small stream, gathering from all directions and finally condensing together. As the Yuan Li in her body was completely condensed in her hands, Yun Nuoxing slowly exhaled. Her brows suddenly became sharp. The speed of her hand seals suddenly increased. Afterimages flew everywhere, as if there were dozens of hands dancing together. Her hand seals suddenly froze on top of strange hand seal. Her hands were like snakes that were entwined with each other, like a lotus that was hugging each other. As the hand seals froze, Yun Nuoxing's tightly shut beautiful eyes suddenly opened. A dazzling light that seemed to have substance shot out from them, causing Duan Yuntai's heart to violently jump. The frozen hand seals dissipated slightly. The vigorous Yuan Li that was erupting from the soul-burning art in Yun Nuoxing's body also slowly stopped. Immediately, a bright scarlet light erupted from her palm. As the light spread, a layer of strange scarlet crystal layers spread along Yun Nuoxing's palm. In just a breath's time, a layer of strange crystal layer was stuck on her palm. It was as if it was made of crystal and was extremely beautiful. As soon as the sparkling and translucent palm appeared, the space around Yun Nuoxing suddenly fluctuated. Waves of heaven and earth energy uncontrollably rushed towards Yun Nuoxing's palm, turning into a whirlwind. The powerful pressure that spread out caused Duan Yuntai to feel a sense of oppression in his heart. The sudden appearance of the frightening energy fluctuation also attracted the attention of the Gold Divine King and the rest who were fighting in the sky. All of them were slightly stunned. Immediately, many shocked gazes were shot over. Finally, they were fixed on Yun Nuoxing's palm. Many gasps involuntarily emitted from their mouths as they sensed the strange fluctuation. Good heavens, a divine-level profound skill. Jin Wang felt the fluctuation that made his heart palpitate. He couldn't help but wipe off his cold sweat. Then, he couldn't help but feel a little worried. This kid's strength is only at the mundane level. It's too much for him to use a divine-level profound skill. He can't even use a millionth of its power. No, I received the highest level of training in the deity's Templar. I stepped into the 5th level of the immortal realm before the age of 30. I've been on the battlefield for a total of 5 years and experienced countless life and death battles. My efforts are definitely not inferior to people like you. I won't allow myself to fail. Duan Yuntai let out a furious roar when he sensed the terror of the sparkling palm. Flames spurted out from his eyes and mouth, as if they were about to combust. An illusory storm rolled and boiled outside of his body. The moment his majestic spiritual strength appeared, it gushed towards his black hand. The illusory energy was compressed to the point that it was corporeal. The faint milky white energy layer emitted an energy that caused one's soul to palpitate. It merged with the black hand, causing the scarlet red light to turn pitch black, while the brutal energy became even more berserk. When the energy spread out, both sides were stunned. They turned their gazes and saw Duan Yuntai's right hand being burned by the black flames. They felt a little embarrassed. These two lunatics were fighting to this extent. No, it's not enough. Duan Yuntai roared in anger. His long hair danced in the wind like a madman. His disheveled appearance was abnormally terrifying. His eyes revealed a trace of determination. At the same time, a strange fluctuation slowly spread out from his body. Yuntai, you still can't use that. Feng Yin saw the determination in Duan Yuntai's eyes. He was so scared that his face turned pale. He couldn't help but shout. However, as soon as he finished speaking, he saw a scene that made him shiver. Golden flames slowly spread out from Duan Yuntai's body. As soon as the golden flames appeared, his black palm turned golden. The black flames that were coiling around like snakes also gradually turned golden. The temperature was so high that it made the space tremble. When his entire black palm turned golden, the tyrannical energy seemed to have calmed down. If one looked closely, there was a strange black color within the golden color. It was terrifying. Great demon sacred flame palm. Just as the golden flames engulfed Duan Yuntai's arm, Duan Yuntai let out a cold shout. His arm, which had been stretched backwards, was thrust forward. The golden flames immediately left his hand. A huge black hand wrapped around the golden flames transformed into a 10,000 feet large hand that shot towards Yun Nuo star with lightning speed. As the golden flames left his hand, Duan Yuntai's black palm suddenly stiffened. The symbols and runes on it dimmed. His aura became somewhat weak, and his body trembled violently. His pale face seemed to be telling others that he had reached his limit. Flame demon burning sky palm. Yin Nuashing inhaled a deep breath of air when he saw the golden light shooting over. That fanaticism once again surged onto his face. The scarlet-colored symbol completely lit up and became extremely bright. Immediately, his hands relaxed slightly. His right hand, which was covered by the scarlet-colored crystal layer, was slowly lifted, after which he pushed violently. The scarlet-colored crystal hand seal immediately left his hand. Finally, it transformed into a 10 feet large crystal glow that penetrated through the empty space. It was accompanied by the chaotic natural energy as it flashed towards the enormous hand seal. The crystal layer, which was only a few feet in size, appeared too insignificant in front of the gigantic palm print. However, the tiny palm print contained an energy that caused the gold divine king to sigh involuntarily. The two palm prints violently collided under everyone's watchful eyes. The two terrifying energies that even God-level experts couldn't help but raise their eyebrows finally collided with each other like two colliding meteorites. When the two collided, the expected loud sound didn't come. The two terrifying energies turned into a golden color and a scarlet color in the sky. They were like two oceans that were mixed together, constantly eroding each other. At the point of contact, the space trembled rapidly. It looked like it would explode at any time. As the two terrifying energies eroded each other, energy ripples that were about 10,000 feet large spread out from the point of contact. As the terrifying energy ripples spread out, Jin Wang and the others hurriedly retreated. As for Yao Hua and the others, they had already flown to a place where they couldn't see. They watched the collision of the two energies from afar and wiped away their sweat. They clearly knew that if they were contaminated by that abnormally violent energy, their souls would definitely be destroyed. Circular energy ripples endlessly spread out, enveloping everything within a radius of several thousand feet. In an instant, thunderbolts came crashing down from the sky, causing the clouds to rapidly churn. The skies seemed to shatter, and the pitch-black ceiling array began to wobble as if it was about to collapse. The erosion of the two energies lasted for about a dozen seconds. Finally, in the roar of a thunderstorm, an extremely large golden-red energy ripple burst out, and a huge energy light beam shot up into the sky. The golden-red energy light pillar emitted circles of energy ripples that swept across the sky. These shock waves roared as they covered the ground, directly turning the large courtyard below into ruins. Dozens of cracks appeared on the ground amidst the rumbling sounds. There was even a huge rock that was directly shattered into dust. The entire large courtyard disappeared in an instant, leaving behind only a mess. The golden red shockwave naturally included Yin Nuashing and Duan Yuntai. That terrifying energy shockwave could probably instantly kill a half-demon. However, at the place where the light and energy shockwaves filled the sky, a scene that shocked all the gods appeared. The 6 black wings were like black messengers. When a golden light approached him, it would be completely devoured. Yin Nuashing stepped on 2 arrays and flew through the air amidst the chaotic energy ripples. The 6 wings spread out like a barrier to protect Yin Nuashing. Waves of golden red energy shock waves cut through the air, causing his wings to tremble slightly. However, it had no effect on him at all. Instead, it made the scarlet runes on his body shine even brighter. That wild and sinister smile, combined with the runes, made him look like a black demon king. In just a few breaths of time, he rushed to Duan Yuntai's side and suddenly reached out with his hand. Looking at Yin Nuashing, who was madly rushing over, Duan Yuntai only felt that it was very absurd. In the chaotic and violent energy, even a half-demon expert would fall. However, Yin Nuashing directly stepped on 2 arrays and flapped his 6 wings, directly rushing towards him. He directly passed through the center of the violent energy. How could he not be shocked? A huge force came from his throat, causing Duan Yuntai to cry out in pain. He only felt that his body was being hung up. He struggled to lower his head, but what he saw was a devilish face that was like a demon king's. Those bright eyes were so terrifying in the former's eyes. Chapter 154. In the sky, as the terrifying shock wave dissipated, the pillar of light that pierced through the sky also dimmed down. The place where the two terrifying shock waves collided also gradually calmed down, and in the end, it slowly dissipated. Everyone present finally sighed in relief when they saw that the frightening energies had finally dissipated. The energy ripple from earlier was really too frightening. If a few more waves were to appear, it was likely that only a pile of stone powder would remain in this sealed area. Following the gradual annihilation of the energy, the howling wild wind and thunderbolts in the sky also gradually calmed down. The dust that filled the sky also settled. The only thing that could be seen was two human figures standing together. As they looked at Duan Yuntai, who was being lifted by Yun Nuoshing with one hand, the disciples of the sacred weapon divine hall involuntarily felt dispirited. Cough! After revealing himself, Duan Yuntai coughed violently. The shock wave that enveloped his body disappeared without a trace. Clearly, using such a high-level profound skill had caused an unimaginable backlash to his body. Are you really at the mortal rank? Looking at Yun Nuoshing in front of him with lingering fear, Duan Yuntai's face was filled with reluctance. He was one of the most outstanding disciples of the sacred weapon divine palace. Although he wasn't ranked at the top, there was no need to doubt his strength. With the resources of the sacred weapon divine palace, his achievements were enough to make many feel inferior. Many elders in the sacred weapon divine palace thought highly of him, and even the palace master had guided him. However, today he was defeated by Yun Nuoshing, whose cultivation was much lower than his. He couldn't believe it. The real deal, mortal rank 9th level. Yun Nuoshing grinned, and the wildness on his face slowly disappeared. The energy that was surging in his body also slowly stopped, as if it was exhausted. The surging energy also slowly disappeared, and the soul-burning art returned to its normal state. The scarlet runes on his body also gradually dimmed and disappeared into his skin. If you tell me you're in the 5th layer, I'll feel better. Duan Yuntai smiled wryly and coughed up blood. His pride had been completely crushed today. He slowly exhaled and said coldly, "Kill me." Handing over the formation means betraying the sacred weapon shrine, so I won't hand it over. Hearing this, Yun Nuoshing raised her eyebrows and suddenly laughed. You have some backbone. However, I guess that the sacred artifact, Great Array, would not be placed on you alone. That is a combined array, right? How can you use it alone? This is also one of the defensive measures that the sacred artifact shrine has. I have seen it once, so I guessed it. Duan Yuntai took a deep breath and looked at Yun Nuoshing in surprise. His throat moved with difficulty, and he smiled wryly. A person like you is still so smart. You're really abnormal. Just as Yun Nuo Planet had said, the sacred artifact array was a combined attack array. It required many people to activate it together. Each person controlled a fragment of the array. Every time, the sacred artifact array was activated by many disciples. Only the elders controlled a fragment of the array. This was also a safety measure to protect the sacred artifact array. If a disciple was caught outside, the core would not be leaked. Moreover, this array could not be activated by one person without sufficient strength. You're too kind. Yun Nuoshing grinned. His smile was as bright as the sun. That pure smile stunned Duan Yuntai. Shortly after, Yun Nuoshing said in a low voice, "All right, let's go and sleep now." As soon as she said that, Duan Yuntai felt a wave of dizziness in his head. His vision suddenly blurred. Before he closed his eyes, he felt a little strange. They were enemies. How could they let him go just like that? Now that they had already formed a grudge, wasn't she afraid that he would come looking for trouble in the future? Yuntai. When he saw Duan Yuntai slowly close his eyes, Feng Yan's heart trembled. Murderous intent surged out, and he finally let out a wild roar. His body charged toward Yun Nuoshing like lightning. His shriveled hands suddenly grabbed and two huge fire snakes, which carried a blazing wind, were violently thrown toward Yin Nuoxing. "Old bastard, you bastard!" Yin Nuoxing cursed angrily in the face of Feng Yan's furious attack. She hurriedly grabbed Duan Yuntai and retreated quickly. Fire elemental energy surged out of her body, and a huge bronze sword shot out from her sleeve, colliding heavily with the two fire snakes. Boom! A clear sound rang out. Immediately, a terrifying energy fluctuation surged out from the point of contact. As the space trembled, the huge sword in Yin Nuoxing's hand trembled slightly and rebounded onto his body, causing him to grimace in pain. With a muffled groan, he flapped his 6 wings and retreated explosively. "Old bastard, a god king is attacking a junior. Aren't you a little too shameless?" His figure turned into a beam of golden light and appeared behind Yin Nuoxing. He placed his palm on Yin Nuoxing's body and stopped him from retreating. He looked at Feng Yin and sneered. "Our battle is not over yet. It doesn't matter if you're from the 9 divine halls or any other divine halls. Don't even think about escaping today." Feng Yan's furious roar rang through the sky. Soon after, 5 fire snakes surged out from his body. The fire elemental energy that filled every single snake was more than twice as dense as before. "Set up the formation." As his roar rang out, his figure rapidly retreated. The 5 giant snakes also abruptly trembled. Soon after, one of the fire snakes suddenly bit the tail of another fire snake, while the other fire snake also bit the tail of the other fire snake. They formed a circle that was 1,000 feet in size. As the 5 snakes bit each other with their heads and tails connected, an array abruptly appeared with them as the boundary. Swish! When the 5 fire snakes moved, the other 6 people hurriedly broke free as well. With a flash, they appeared in the huge circle of fire snakes and scattered. Feng Yin and the others just happened to be in the 8th position. However, King Shunluo was still fighting Yishi, so it was difficult for him to break free immediately. The seal formed by Feng Yan's hands suddenly changed, and the aura from his entire body broke out. That frightening aura caused the entire space to tremble. Immediately, the seal formed by the 7 of them changed, and a line of fire shot out from the formation. Immediately, it connected the 7 of them into a circle. The 7 frightening energies immediately connected together. At this moment, the aura of the 7 of them began to soar in front of everyone's surprised eyes. In a short moment, they returned to their peak condition. I was wondering why they were only God Kings the first time we met, but now they're God Underworld experts. So that's how it is. Yin Nuoxing came to a slight realization when she saw the formation. The formation connected the 7 people's energies together, turning them into one tremendous energy that could be used at the same time. At first glance, it seemed as if 7 God Underworld experts had appeared, but they were actually still at their original level. Feng Yin let out a ferocious laugh after his aura had returned to its peak condition. His hand seal suddenly changed, and the 7 of them immediately let out a furious cry in unison. Their auras surged, and numerous enormous flame-light pillars appeared from their bodies, after which they abruptly charged toward the sky. 7 different colored flames lit up the sky in an extremely beautiful manner. 7 sacred flame tool formation set up. The sudden eruption of the pillars of fire caused Feng Yan's face to redden. A vicious glint flashed through his eyes. His hand seals suddenly changed as a cold cry rang out from his mouth. Following Feng Yan's shout, the other 6 people simultaneously changed their hand seals. The array formed by the fire snake also abruptly expanded by a lot, completely enveloping this sealed space. Roar! Low and deep roars rang out from the mouths of the 7 people. Soon after, 7 pillars of fire of different colors shot out from their bodies, after which they shot straight into each other's bodies, forming a perfect 7-pointed star. Chi-chi! As the fire pillar entered their bodies, the surface of the 7 people's bodies also erupted with waves of brilliant luster. Flames shot out from their bodies one after another, after which they rushed out in a disorderly manner, transforming into rays of light that rapidly drew at a dazzling speed. In just a moment, they had drawn a mysterious large formation. The mysterious and complicated flame formation that was surrounded by 7 colored flames had just been formed when the bright light curtain suddenly spread apart. It passed by Yun Nuoxing and Jin Jinwang's group in a lightning-like manner. Only when it collided with Yi Shi's sealing formation did it come to a halt. Everyone present, including the disciples of the sacred weapon divine hall, were wrapped within this light curtain. The sudden change caused the expressions of Jin Jinwang's group to change. Lei Shenwang roared furiously. His body rushed out in a lightning-like manner. His hand was clenched into a fist as he suddenly smashed it into the light curtain. A majestic lightning glow surged out and violently smashed onto the light curtain. However, it only caused it to tremble slightly. The lightning glow was incinerated into nothingness when it came into contact with the 7-colored flame. Old Jin, the interior of this large formation is filled with fire elements. The 7-colored flame is extremely powerful. Even the divine yuan within my body is being suppressed. The expression of Lei Shenwang, who had returned to his original spot, changed slightly when he sensed that its strength had weakened significantly. However, it quickly returned to normal. Jin Jinwang, on the other hand, had a relaxed expression. His eyes glanced indifferently at Feng Yan's group in the middle of the formation. He laughed softly. Old Shuego, the water Shenwang rolled his eyes and nodded. His feet gently stomped on the ground. Immediately, his hands formed a dazzling seal with lightning-like speed. Following the change of the seal formed by his hands, the water elements in the air seemed to have quietly become active. Those fire elements that were nearby were suppressed by the rich water elements in this place and retreated far away. Final struggle. Feng Yin looked at Jin Jinwang's group in the large formation, after which he looked at Yin Nuoxing and sneered. Jin Jinwang, I will not waste my breath with you. Hand that brat over, and I guarantee that the people from the 9 Divine Hall will not be harmed. Just as his voice sounded out, Feng Yan's hand seal suddenly changed once again. As his hand seal changed, waves of ripples came from the fire screen that covered the entire courtyard, after which streams of 7-colored flames intertwined with each other endlessly surged out. In the end, they turned into a monstrous sea of fire that filled the large array. The 7-colored flames were extremely brilliant. However, when the flames appeared, Yun Nuoxing, Yao Hua, and the rest subconsciously took a step back. They could clearly feel that the flames were filled with terrifying energy. With their current strength, they would be burnt to ashes if they came into contact with the heat of that energy. The 7 types of flames were not divine flames. However, they were extremely powerful beast flames. When they merged together, their power was not weaker than some of the lower-ranked divine flames. The kind of power caused Jin Jinwang's expression to change slightly. However, he sneered. If old water was not here today, I'm afraid that there would be some trouble. Jin Jinwang sneered. His eyes contained some ridicule as he looked at Feng Yan. Soon after, his body took a small step to the side and revealed the water Shenwang, who had his hands behind his back. The moment the latter appeared, he lifted his head and looked at Feng Yan. His gentle and elegant face was filled with ridicule as he gently stomped his feet on the ground. Spatial isolation. A cry was emitted from his mouth. Soon after, an azure light line appeared under his feet. The moment the light line appeared, it rushed in all directions at an extremely fast speed. The light lines crossed each other and formed a huge energy array. The moment the huge energy array appeared, it connected head to tail. The empty space within it slowly solidified. In a short period of time, it formed an extremely complicated formation on the ground. The formation was not very big. It was just enough to include everyone. When it had just solidified, Yin Nuoxing realized that the monstrous sea of fire had retreated from the area. Even the terrifying temperature had disappeared. At this moment, there was an additional hole in the magnificent formation in the sky. This caused his eyes to shrink slightly. A hole has been created in the formation. Feng Yan's formation is ineffective in the area where the formation was created by the water Shenhuang. Yin Nuoxing slowly inhaled a mouthful of air. There was some excitement in his eyes. He quickly turned his gaze and looked at the water Shenhuang. In front of the huge sea of fire, the latter was like an ant trying to shake a tree. However, it was such an inconspicuous person who casually stood there that caused the seven-colored destructive sea of fire to lose its effect. This was what an array grandmaster should look like in his heart. Yin Nuoxing sighed in his heart. He quickly lowered his head and opened his evil spirit eye. He was extremely interested in this formation. Chapter 155. The famous Water God King of the Water God Temple. His array is still so powerful. Feng Yan's face sank when he saw the empty area. The smile on his face was very ugly. He didn't intend to increase the power of the array. Those who had dealt with the Water God King before knew that arrays were useless against him. Just by opening a safe area on top of another array, he had the strength to face many array masters alone. Therefore, he also knew that the appearance of the Water God Emperor had completely rendered their trump card useless. Apart from some special arrays that were unaffected by the isolation array, no one else could do anything to him. Damn it! Why didn't I receive the message that the Water God King had come to Yuyin City? Feng Yan clenched his teeth fiercely. The seven-colored flame that was raging on his body was much more restrained. Today, with the Water God King here, this formation did not have much of a deterrent effect on the Gold God King and the others. If they were to use the sacred weapon formation, the effect would be the same. This sudden change really made him anxious. They did not receive the news of Yin Nuoxing's disappearance. Naturally, they did not know that the Gold God King had hurriedly called the Water God King over. While Feng Yan was at his wit's end, Yin Nuoxing had already imprinted the appearance of the formation into his mind. However, he had not analyzed it yet, and only had a rough idea of it. It was impossible for him to use it like this. Only by analyzing it and completely understanding the composition inside could he try to use it himself. However, it was obviously not the time yet. He lowered his head and looked at Duan Yuntai in his hand. His soul power gushed out from his forehead and wrapped around Duan Yuntai. After a while, it finally stopped at a golden bracelet on Duan Yuntai's hand. Feng Yan couldn't help but laugh sinisterly. His soul power surged into the bracelet. However, when his soul touched the bracelet, it was bounced back by a force. A soul imprint? Yin Nuoxing raised an eyebrow and couldn't help but grin. Although Duan Yuntai was a 5th-level immortal, his soul force was also at the upper limit of the 5th-level immortal rank. Moreover, the latter had fainted and didn't resist. The soul imprint didn't have much defensive power. Yin Nuoxing removed the golden bangle and rubbed it on her palm. A wave of spiritual strength surged out like floodwaters. One could hear a slight cracking sound, and the spiritual imprint within the golden bangle was directly erased by Yin Nuoxing. Yin Nuoxing casually wiped off the spiritual imprint on the golden hoop. Her spiritual strength finally entered it without any hindrance. After a brief search, she clenched her hand, and an exceptionally thick fiery red scroll appeared in a flash. Saint Seal Mantra. Yin Nuoxing's gaze swept across the scroll. Then his gaze paused on the 3 golden words on the scroll. A blazing heat wave immediately spread out. Carefully opening the scroll, Yin Nuoxing roughly glanced at the introduction of this profound skill. His eyebrows slightly raised. He thought of the hand seals that Mu Qing and Duan Yuntai used. They were extremely powerful and could unleash the explosive power of the fire element to the extreme. If combined with a special flame and other profound skills, it could cause unimaginable damage to the enemy. A high-grade devil rank profound skill. The last seal can match the explosive power of a divine rank profound skill. If combined with the soul-burning art, I wonder how powerful it can be. Even in the sacred artifact Divine Palace, this so-called Saint Seal Mantra could be considered a rather high-level profound skill. This point could be seen from the power that Duan Yuntai displayed when he used it. Condense and compress one's own energy and even spiritual strength to the extreme. In an instant, it can unleash an attack that is several times stronger than the original energy. Looking at one of the words, Yin Nuashing suddenly understood. No wonder Duan Yuntai could compress the fire element to such a degree. It was the effect of this profound skill. It could compress energy. He had to admit that it was a very strange, profound skill. He personally experienced the power of the brilliant fire seal. It forced him to use the divine light mirror to block it. Otherwise, it would be his turn to lie on the ground. With Duan Yuntai's strength at the 5th level of the immortal rank, the brilliant fire seal could unleash an attack that was comparable to the full power of a half-devil rank expert. He wondered how powerful the brilliant sun seal behind it would be. Looking at the back of the glorious sun seal, he could only see the word saint. There was nothing else, but there was an empty space. It clearly told others that there should be something written here, but why couldn't they see it? Yin Nuashing didn't know either, and now was not the time to study in detail. They were still in a difficult situation. Withdrawing his spiritual strength from the golden ring, Yin Nuashing couldn't help but sigh as he looked at Water God King and Feng Yin, who were still in a deadlock. He glanced at Duan Yuntai in his hand and thought for a while. The corner of his mouth couldn't help but curl up. Elder Feng Yin, let's make a deal. Yin Nuashing suddenly laughed. He lifted Duan Yuntai by the back of his collar and shook him like he was a chicken. Feng Yin's eyes turned red when he saw how Yin Nuashing treated Duan Yuntai. Even his breathing quickened. Although Duan Yuntai wasn't as talented as the godsons and some of the most talented people in the Sacred Weapon Divine Palace, his talent wasn't weak either. He could be ranked among the top of the younger generation in the Divine Palace. Calm down. The black-clothed old man patted Feng Yan's shoulder, causing him to tremble slightly. He nodded his head, and his violently shaken state of mind suddenly calmed down. At their level, it was impossible for their state of mind to be shaken by such things. Right now, they all needed to calm down. Taking a deep breath, Feng Yin looked at Yin Nuashing coldly and said in a deep voice, "Kid, why did you bring the people of the 9 divine palaces to visit my divine palace?" Hearing this question, Yin Nuashing could not help but be taken aback. Soon after, he could not help but laugh loudly, causing Feng Yan's face to tremble. After quite a while, Yin Nuashing said with a smile that did not seem like a smile, "Old man, as a God King expert, you shouldn't be suffering from senile dementia or auditory hallucinations so early. Or are you close to the end of your life? Do you want me to prepare a coffin for you? How big do you want? Where do you want to be buried? You can choose any of the 4 origin regions in the Divine Prefecture." Why is your face red? Are you worried that my coffin won't work? Don't worry, my craftsmanship isn't a problem. The materials are definitely up to standard. I've tried it before. I can forge a 3rd-level weapon. Even a mortal realm expert said that it's good. There's a 1% chance that it won't explode. There's no problem. May I ask if you want a jade gold coffin, spirit vine coffin, ice condensing coffin, fire rock coffin, thick earth coffin, or star coffin? What? You're not satisfied? Do you want to be cremated? That's not a problem. I recommend that you burn yourself. You can burn yourself from head to toe, from the inside to the outside. If you're worried that you won't be able to burn yourself to death, you can contact Senior Fire God King. I guarantee that he'll burn you to ashes. It'll save you the trouble of finding a burial place. It won't be fun if your ashes scatter. Bastard, this old man doesn't have time to joke with you. Feng Yan's brows twitched. He coldly snorted and stomped his foot on the void. A monstrous wave of fire covered the sky and covered Yin Nuashing. However, just as he stepped into the Water God King's array, the wave of fire no longer had any energy. Jin Wang gently waved his sleeve and a golden light shot out. It collided with the wave of fire and both were annihilated in an instant. "Sigh, old man, you're too impulsive. I'm not joking with you. How old is your daughter? Why don't you exchange your life for hers? Look, this Duan Yunai seems to be a figure in your divine palace. His talent is not bad, and he will definitely become a god in the future. If he works hard, he might even become a god. Is he comparable to your daughter?" Forget it if he's not good looking. I'll find a way to refine this guy into a puppet that only listens to my orders and slowly cultivate him into a god. It seems to be a pretty good choice. When he reaches the god level, I'll let him go and flatten the sacred weapon divine palace. I don't know how it'll feel to sit at the side and watch while drinking tea and nibbling on melon seeds. However, I still think that your daughter is better. Does she have a good figure? Does she have long hair or short hair? I have a very high aesthetic standard. Do you have a portrait? Just think about it. Yin Nuoxing's words seemed to have suddenly opened. She was like a torrent of water that flowed endlessly. Jin Wang and the others were sweating profusely. The beautiful woman and Xiao Xian were also a little speechless. Mei Mao looked at the former strangely. Why was this child, who was usually quiet, so crazy now? Listening to Yin Nuoxing's nonsense, Feng Yin only felt his entire body trembling. His mind was in a mess of nonsense, and his snow-white eyebrows trembled countless times. Even the black-clothed old man at the side was somewhat speechless. So this brat was actually such a bastard. Why didn't he give others the impression that he was like this? Of course, if you think it's not enough, you can give me a divine artifact array, and I will consider it. If we keep fighting, you will lose no matter how you look at it. At that time, I will personally search your souls, find the array, and take out your treasures. Then, I will take off your clothes, tie you up, and hang you on the city gate. At dawn, there will be people watching, and it will definitely become a joke in Yuyan City. It will be passed down for thousands of years in Yuyan City until the next era. At that time, the Divine Artifact Palace will also be proud of your existence. Generations of palace masters will talk about this matter with fervor and assurance, which seems to be a good picture. I just don't know if you will still be alive at that time, and if you have calluses in your ears. Do you have any calluses? Yin Nuoxing said a lot of things, which made everyone feel dizzy. This brat really dares to say anything. Even if he doesn't kill Feng Yin, he will probably be angered to death. You brat, don't go too far. The Divine Tool Array is the highest secret of our Divine Tool Array. It can't be leaked out. Feng Yan's face alternated between green and red. His shriveled fingers were clenched so tightly that they turned white. Feng Yan roared with a trembling voice. However, he couldn't help imagining that scene. His trembling body became even more obvious. If I really become like that, I'd rather die. Oh, is the Divine Tool Array so important? Is it more precious than this brother in my hand, this future god? Or is it more precious than your reputation? Could it be that a scroll of Divine Tool Array can't replace the loss of your reputation hanging on the city gate? Could it be more precious than your daughter? Aya, as a parent, how can you be so heartless? Your own flesh and blood can't even compare to the value of a scroll of Divine Tool Array. Didn't they say that family love is priceless? How can a human heart be described with the word cold? Your daughter is so pitiful. Why don't you let me take care of her in the future? I'll definitely raise her until she's fair and plump. She can find a good family to marry in the future and live a happy and worry-free life. Wouldn't that be great? Yin Nuoxing shook his head bitterly. Everyone was completely speechless. Feng Yin almost spat out a mouthful of old blood. White smoke was rising from his head because of his rage. Not to mention that I don't have a daughter. Why do you keep talking about my daughter? You. Feng Yin's finger that was pointing at Yin Nuoxing trembled with anger. He was so angry that his teeth were chattering and his snot was flowing out. He couldn't say a word for a long time, and his eyes were burning with anger. Seeing this, the black-clothed old man couldn't help but shake his head. Not to mention Feng Yin, even his state of mind would be broken if he were to face this ruffian. Elder, get out of the way! The sudden cry caused both parties to be stunned. They saw a dazzling golden light flash across the sky, causing everyone to hurriedly turn their heads. Majestic energy was being generated above their heads. That destructive aura caused the experts from both parties to be slightly startled. Their eyes hurriedly turned and looked in the direction of the golden light. However, this glance caused the faces of Feng Yin, Jin Wang, and the others to change. The former was slightly shocked, then a hint of joy surged onto his face. However, the latter's and the other's faces were a little stiff. That was because they saw a giant golden sword that was 1,000 feet long, slowly rotating in the golden light. The golden light condensed at the tip of the sword was a vast energy that caused the space to tremble. It caused Jin Wang and Yin Nuoxing to suck in a breath of cold air. Looking up, the two figures beside the sword's hilt appeared extremely sacred under the illumination of the golden light, as if they were gods that had descended to the mortal world. The green-clothed and gray-clothed figures were Mu Qing and Duan Qinghai, who had disappeared at the start of the battle. The two of them only came together at this moment, carrying a giant divine weapon that could threaten divine underworld experts. That scene caused Jin Wang to involuntarily swallow his saliva. "You go and die." The two pairs of eyes were directly locked onto Yin Nuoxing. Mu Qing and Duan Qinghai's eyes were wide open in anger. With a ferocious roar, they fiercely clapped their hands together and a giant energy ring appeared. Then, the giant golden sword suddenly pierced towards Yin Nuoxing under everyone's nervous gazes. Chapter 156. The huge golden sword was like a streak of golden light that streaked across the sky. As the two of them bellowed out, it smashed down from the sky with astonishing ripples of energy. The terrifying gale created a huge crack in the ground below. Yin Nuoxing's eyes narrowed slightly. Before he could do anything, the space before him suddenly flashed. Afterwards, he saw a huge barrier of energy being constructed by Jin Wang and the others. "Ward!" the graceful woman called out. A speck of golden light suddenly flickered under her feet. Tremendous energy surged as the speck of golden light began to draw rapidly. In just a single moment, it had formed a profound and complicated golden formation. A golden barrier also stuck to the barrier constructed by Jin Wang and the others. Golden light flowed, and it seemed extremely tough. Of course, it seemed very similar to a Saint technique formation. However, Yin Nuoxing did not sense any ripple from the formation. He did not see any wide energy matrices on the outermost layer of the formation, so it was not a formation. It should be some wondrous profound skill. A magical formation was made up of energy matrix lines, formation eyes, and energy lines that acted as a drawing board for weaving. Runes would also be added to help the magical formation unfold. The most basic and most important energy matrix lines were used to determine the size of the magical formation that one was weaving. It was equivalent to providing a magical formation master with a drawing board to draw freely. However, Shaoxian's formation did not have any energy matrices. It was only a formation in the end. It was not a formation. As soon as Jin Wang and the others' barrier took shape, the huge golden sword arrived unexpectedly. It stabbed into the barrier viciously. Immediately, the barrier created by Jin Wang and the others began to tremble violently. Wave-like ripples appeared on the surface, and a few thin cracks slowly appeared near the edges. When the violent ripples of energy appeared, Feng Yin and the others hurriedly dispersed the formation. Immediately, the sea of fire that had spread across the entire black formation vanished in just a few seconds. Feng Yin and the others retreated far away as well, afraid that they would be affected by the energy. The forbidden artifact was of an extremely high grade. Even a single ripple from it would be painful for them to be struck by it. Kacha! The faint cracking sound did not escape the ears of Jin Wang and the rest. Immediately, their faces turned slightly pale as they fiercely gritted their teeth. Metal elements continuously gushed out from their bodies and slammed into the barrier, blocking the terrifying energy. However, even so, the crack continued to spread at an impressive speed. "Didn't I just beat the two of you up once? Do you have to hate me so much?" Yin Nuoxing raised his head with great difficulty under the terrifying pressure. The dazzling golden light blocked his vision, but he could still vaguely see the two people 3,000 meters in the sky. Their eyes were filled with an indelible hatred, causing Yin Nuoxing's pupils to shrink slightly. He could not help but sigh. His mischievous smile slowly disappeared, and a ruthless look flashed across his eyes. Since you want me to die so badly, then I'll just kill you. How is it? Do you like it, John Doe? Suddenly, a voice filled with hatred rang in his ears, causing Yun Nuoxing to be stunned. After carefully analyzing it, he realized that it seemed to be Duan Qinghai's voice. When you attacked us, we retreated to the depths of the courtyard just to prepare this unique gift for you. Mu Qing's resentful voice also rang out. In a Green Cloud restaurant, Yin Nuoxing had humiliated him. Happy to let him go. However, seeing that even Duan Yuntai was not Yin Nuoxing's enemy, the two of them had no choice but to use this huge golden sword. This huge sword was a forbidden weapon, a high-level divine weapon. It could even severely injure a high-level god. However, a forbidden weapon could only be used a few times. Every time it was used, the life and power of the forbidden weapon would decrease. However, its value was that it could explode with power that would cause the enemy to tremble in fear in an instant. It's a good weapon, but I'm afraid it can't be used many times. Yin Nuoxing glanced at the two of them and said indifferently, the forbidden weapon's attack could not be sustained forever. There was always a time limit. As long as the time was up, the moment the huge golden sword shattered, he was confident that he could use Ling Hong's sword to cut them in half. It's indeed not many, but it's enough to keep all of you here. Duan Qinghai sneered and slapped the huge sword's hilt with his palm, causing the power contained in it to become even more violent. The sudden increase in pressure made Jin Wang and the others' faces turn red. They could not help but let out a muffled groan. Their hands were pressed against the energy barrier, and their bodies were forced down by the huge pressure. Hey, didn't you want to kill me? I'm just a level 9 mortal. To you, I'm just an ant that you can crush with a flick of your fingers. Why do you have to go through so much trouble to use a forbidden weapon? Don't tell me you don't have the confidence to defeat me? Yin Nuoxing said with a faint smile. You don't have to provoke me, John Doe. Even 6 Senior was defeated by you. We don't have the heart to defend our title. We just want to kill you. In this world, the winner is the king and the loser is the bandit. Survival is victory. Mu Qing laughed loudly. His ferocious appearance made Yin Nuoxing sigh. This guy had already fallen into his own inner demon. Once you fall into your inner demon, your state of mind will be shattered. Even if you don't care, you won't be able to live for long. Sooner or later, you'll fall into self-destruction. The beautiful woman also sighed at this time. She turned her head and looked at Yin Nuoxing, Yao Hua, and the others. She said indifferently, you have to take this as a warning. Success or failure doesn't mean everything. If you lose, you have to have the courage to admit it. As long as you follow your heart, you won't have to worry about not being able to make a comeback. Senior, Yin Nuoxing took a deep breath and nodded solemnly. Yao Hua and the others also engraved these words in their hearts. Haha, nothing matters anymore. As long as you die, 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 die. As long as I kill you, I'm still the same old me. Mu Qing threw his head back and laughed loudly. His eyes were filled with a demonic tyranny. He stared fixedly at Yin Nuoxing. His ferocious appearance made it seem as if he wanted to skin her alive. The moment the barrier shatters, I'll do my best to protect you. If you have a chance, run away. You could just help me clean up the mess later. The beautiful woman suddenly spoke indifferently as she stared at the barrier that was close to breaking. Everyone's heart skipped a beat. What nonsense are you talking about? The Golden God King suddenly turned his head and glared at the beautiful woman with his golden eyes. He angrily rebuked. They could still hold on. He didn't believe that a mere forbidden weapon could do anything to them. No, I'll hold on. Yin Nuoxing quickly shook his head and reached out to pull the beautiful woman behind him. Without waiting for her to speak, he waved his right hand and the silver-blue Ling Hong sword appeared in his hand with a flash of light. The terrifying power of space caused her to fiercely suck in a breath of cold air. I'm the one who requested to fight. Let me bear the consequences alone. I can't let Senior bear the consequences for me. As if she knew what the beautiful woman wanted to say, Yin Nuoxing turned her head and looked at her solemnly with her pitch-black eyes. Her resolute look made it impossible for her to refuse. She placed her delicate hand on Yun Nuoxing's shoulder and opened her mouth a few times. She wanted to say something, but no words came out. In the end, she could only sigh softly and shake her head. "Aren't we going to help?" The black-clothed elder from the sacred weapon Divine Hall looked at the energy barrier that was about to collapse under the pressure of the giant sword. Terrifying energy flowed through his body as he turned his head to look at Feng Yin. It seemed as if the latter would attack at lightning speed and tear apart the last defense of Jin Wang and the others, giving them the final blow. "If I could help, I wouldn't have to stand here like a scarecrow." Feng Yin glanced at him indifferently. Then, he looked at Mu Qing and Duan Qinghai in the sky. His gaze paused on Duan Qinghai for a while before he slowly moved away. He sighed and said, "Qinghai's attack doesn't differentiate between friend and foe. I'm afraid that if you rush in, you will be attacked by the forbidden weapon. Can you bear it?" The black-clothed old man was stunned when he heard this. Immediately, he bitterly smiled and shook his head. He quietly sighed in his heart. 2 disciples with limitless prospects had turned into a devil just like that. It was really sad and lamentable. "Now let's wait quietly. We can't do anything." Feng Yin heaved a long sigh of relief. As he thought of this in his heart, his expression suddenly changed. He abruptly lifted his head and turned his gaze towards the black sealed space, which had not shown any activity for a long time. There was suddenly an unusual fluctuation being emitted from that spot. Is the winner going to be decided? Yin Nuoxing also stared at the space. He suddenly became nervous. This was the first time Yishi had fought against a god after his level had dropped. It made him extremely nervous. In the distant sky, a strange fluctuation suddenly appeared in the huge black spherical space. Black energy ripples spread out like water, and even the huge golden sword was affected. As the ripples spread out, the darkness in the spherical space quietly receded in a short while. The black formation also gradually faded. In the end, the space simply returned to its original state. Following the disappearance of the array that sealed that area, the black energy that had been sealed within immediately began to spread out without any restraint. Chi. When the golden energy that flowed around the huge golden sword came into contact with the black energy, it produced a sizzling sound. Afterward, Jin Wang and the others felt that the extremely strong pressure had actually dissipated by a lot. The energy barrier that was on the verge of shattering could finally be seen. The huge sword had made a dent in it. Only a tiny bit of the barrier remained at the point of contact. It could be said that this was the most dangerous moment. Seeing that the barrier was on the verge of shattering, Jin Wang and the others hurriedly wiped away their sweat. The energy in their bodies surged out without restraint. If Yishi's seal had not coincidentally dissipated and the black energy had not surged out, the huge sword would have already pierced them. What? Feeling that the forbidden weapon's energy had weakened by a lot, Mu Qing and Feng Yin were stunned. They raised their heads in shock and looked at each other. Then, a ruthless look surged into their eyes. Their hands quickly formed seals, but before they could form any seals, they heard a loud laugh. Too slow. The moment the golden light dimmed, Yin Nuoxing was the first to sense it. The veins on her hand that was holding the Ling Hong sword bulged. Scarlet energy, runes appeared on her body once again. The violent energy was filled with dense spiritual energy. The aura that suddenly increased shocked Yao Hua and the others. This power seemed to be close to the immortal rank. At this moment, a layer of illusory aura floated around Yun Nuoxing's body. It seemed to be immortal chi. It was the mark of a half-immortal or immortal rank expert. Soul-burning technique, quadruple. Ling Hong sword. 3 swords in 1, spatial rend. With a wild laugh, the Ling Hong sword in his hand suddenly slashed down at the huge golden sword. That extreme speed did not allow anyone to say anything. All they could see was 3 extremely fast silver blue sword glows seemingly connecting into one, just like a huge light screen. The entire area seemed to have turned silent in an instant. An instant later, Mu Qing's and Duan Qinghai's expressions abruptly changed. At this moment, they seemed to have sensed the frightening sword aura that covered the sky and covered the earth coming towards them from below. Asterisk buzz. Buzz. Asterisk the empty space trembled violently at this moment. The moment the strange buzzing sound appeared, one could feel that the huge sword ray that was hundreds of feet wide had ruthlessly pierced through the empty space at a speed that far surpassed the speed of light. Asterisk boom. Asterisk the silver-blue sword ray came quickly and left even faster. Mu Qing and Duan Qinghai's bodies were annihilated the moment the sword ray pierced through their bodies. Not even ashes were left behind. Asterisk crack. Bang. Asterisk two terrifying cracking sounds were heard. Soon after, a wide crack suddenly appeared on the huge golden sword. The space that was pierced by the sword ray instantly turned into a pitch-black, empty space with a cracking sound. The violent spatial fluctuations caused the forbidden weapon to explode with a bang. Asterisk puff. Asterisk Yin Nuoxing's body stiffened for a moment. His face instantly turned pale, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Ling Hongjian trembled as he withdrew back into the pattern on his arm. The scarlet energy rune also withdrew back into his body. A sharp pain that felt like a saw was constantly being emitted from his mind, causing him to have the impulse to tear his head apart. Damn it! I've exhausted too much of my spiritual strength. The sharp pain in his mind caused him to involuntarily let out a bitter laugh. However, this was his last desperate attack. Other than this, he could not think of any other way to stop it. Burn. Chaos. With a ferocious laugh, Yin Nuoxing endured the tearing feeling in his mind and snapped his fingers with his right hand. As he snapped his fingers, the sound turned into an invisible sound wave that instantly spread throughout the entire courtyard. Soon after, the white fog that permeated the air suddenly burned. The blue sea of fire continued to churn and spread towards the sealed space. The high temperature caused the surviving disciples of the sacred weapon Divine Hall to involuntarily howl. Chaos once again filled the place. Asterisk puff. Asterisk after doing all this, Yin Nuoxing's body trembled, and he involuntarily spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. His body also fell on his back. His blurry vision seemed to see the black energy quietly disperse within the serene blue sea of fire. Two figures were also revealed. The petite figure even hurriedly dashed towards him. Chapter 157. The dissipating consciousness floated within the scarlet light. Within the light, an ice-cold aura seeped out and quietly fused with the consciousness. Just as the consciousness was about to completely condense, the scarlet light suddenly trembled and charged towards the formless soul. The consciousness that was condensing was also dragged into the soul. As the scarlet light charged into the soul, the speed at which it fused with the consciousness became much faster. In just a few minutes, the scarlet light suddenly became much brighter, and the ice-cold aura gradually weakened until it completely dissipated. Following the disappearance of the icy cold aura, that muddle-headed consciousness finally completely gathered together. A clear light spread, and that consciousness also slowly woke up. In the small thatched cottage, a ray of sunlight took the opportunity to escape from the dense dark clouds and poured in. It passed through the small window and left spots of light on the pile of straw mats. On the straw mats of the thatched cottage, a figure was quietly lying on it. At a certain moment, the golden light landed on the tightly shut eyes of the figure. The sudden descent of the golden light caused the eyes of the figure to tremble. Soon after, the figure rolled up his eyelids with great difficulty and opened his eyes. As he slightly opened his eyes, the dazzling sunlight disappeared in an instant. He shook his head, and memories surged in his mind like a tidal wave, causing his head to faintly swell. Sitting up from the straw mats, Yin Nuoxing blankly scanned his surroundings and looked at the thatched cottage. He remembered that he had used his full strength to activate the Linghong sword and destroyed the forbidden weapon. He even set it on fire. Yishi seemed to have finished her battle. He wondered who won in the end. Thatched cottage. When he thought of Yishi, Yin Nuoxing was suddenly startled. He straightened his waist and directly sat up. However, when he saw the unfamiliar thatched cottage, he was stunned for a moment. What happened while he was unconscious? He had already walked through the entire Yuyan city, but he had never seen the existence of such a thatched cottage. He shook his head and pushed the straw mats to the side. He hurriedly stood up and fixed his gaze on the interior of the thatched cottage. The thatched cottage was less than 20 feet in length and width. Other than a straw mats on the ground, there was nothing else in the cottage. It was very similar to those thatched cottages that were repaired deep in the mountains. Creak, patting her head, Yin Nuoxing took a deep breath and forced herself to be more alert. She then walked towards the door. With a soft sound, the door of the thatched cottage was gently pushed open. Yin Nuoxing casually walked out and finally saw where she was. This was a basin, and the thatched cottage stood at the highest point of this basin. Looking along the snake-like winding path in front of the door, one could see the entrance of a valley, and beside the thatched cottage, there was another path, which just happened to be able to walk along this path to the steep cliff. A faint energy mist gathered in this basin, and the abundant energy made Yin Nuoxing greedily take a few breaths. Looking at the two paths under her feet, Yin Nuoxing scratched her head and walked towards the cliff. After a few minutes, she stood at the edge of the cliff. She lowered her head and looked down. She could see a pile of rocks inserted into the mountain below. Following the tracks, she slowly lifted her eyes and finally saw a path that had shrunk to the size of a sesame seed. It seemed to extend out from the mountain. Looks like this place is not in Yuyan City. Her gaze followed the path and looked into the distance. However, she could not see anything at the end of her vision. Yin Nuoxing frowned. Just as she was about to turn her gaze, she paused. At the end of the horizon, she seemed to see something strange in the sky. A red sky. Scratching her head, Yin Nuoxing lifted her head again. Her gaze pierced through the layer of faint energy mist. What she saw was a lazy layer of clouds. If they were ordinary clouds, it would not be a big deal. However, the problem was that these lazy, floating clouds were silver. They were metallic silver. They densely covered the entire sky and appeared to be very solid. What exactly is this place? A drop of cold sweat flowed down her forehead. Yin Nuoxing fiercely swallowed a mouthful of saliva. This was the first time she had seen such a strange place. The blood-red sky in the distance and the metallic clouds gave her a feeling that she did not know who had abducted her to this strange place. Hey! Taking a deep breath, Yin Nuoxing shouted towards the basin. Her voice was so mighty that she did not know how far it traveled. One could even hear overlapping echoes. After shouting, she sat down cross-legged and looked around vigilantly. Spots of blue light quietly condensed at her sleeves. Her soul power gushed out from between her eyebrows and entered the Ling Hong sword. Finally, like a wave, it spread out in all directions. With the power of the Ling Hong sword, she could even find people who were hiding in the void. As long as they were not high-level gods who were good at hiding, no one could escape her detection. There's no one, however. After a long while, Yin Nuoxing's eyes were filled with astonishment. She looked at the basin strangely. It felt as though she had been dragged here and then abandoned here. If you don't come out, I'm leaving. Raising her voice, Yin Nuoxing shouted towards the basin again. The sound waves turned into huge waves that covered every inch of the basin. However, there was no movement. Let's go around. I'm not afraid of you. Seeing that there was still no movement, Yin Nuoxing could not help but roll his eyes. Turning his gaze, he looked at the blood-red sky, nodded his head, and walked to the edge of the cliff. With a thought, the wind elements automatically condensed, blowing his windbreaker until it puffed up. She stamped her feet on the ground, and her body suddenly turned into a black arrow. She shot out from the basin and plunged into the energy fog. However, she went straight through it in a moment. Looking back at the basin that was covered by the faint energy fog, Yin Nuoxing took a deep breath and urged the wind elements to the extreme. Her 6 wings slowly spread out, causing the gale to surge even more. Her body was like a black eagle and only a black shadow could be seen flying across the sky. This was a desolate valley. Withered trees and wild grass had fallen to the side. At the entrance of the valley, one could see some grayish-white mountain rocks. As one walked further in, those mountain rocks turned blood red. It was the same color as the blood-red sky in the sky. The two seemed to be resonating with each other. At a glance, one would be able to see a stretch of snow white in the depths of the vast mountain valley. It was as white as snow, covering the entire land and extending over 1,000 kilometers. Regardless of whether it was the small mountain by the side or the flat ground, the eye-piercing snow white seemed to carry a chilling intent. If one were to look a little closer, that chilling intent would abruptly rise to the apex. That was not snow, but tens of thousands, hundreds of millions of white bones. An eerie chill lingered over this valley filled with white bones. The chill from earlier had added a lot of eeriness to it. On the ground, one could also discover that those short white hills were the skeletons left behind by some kind of huge creature. Within the valley, most of the skeletons seemed to belong to humans. Layers upon layers of skeletons covered the ground of the valley. One could not even tell how many skeletons were stacked on top of each other. As the cold and eerie wind blew past, one could seemingly hear a roar that was filled with resentment, causing one's hair to stand on end. How many people had died here? Millions? Tens of millions? Hundreds of millions? Many of the withered bones on the ground had already turned into powder. Some of them were still hard. From the white bone powder that covered the ground, one could determine that this place had existed for at least 10,000 years. The soaring, deathly aura had turned this place into a land of death. Looking at the mountain range there, it was like a huge grave burying many unknown creatures. The sound of rushing wind could be heard from afar. A black figure approached from afar, accompanied by a wild wind. There were even traces of wind and thunder, appearing exceptionally loud in this silent death valley. In just a few breaths, he had arrived at the burial ground of white bones from the entrance of the valley. He could not help but stop when he felt the soaring, deathly aura. As he looked at the dense, white bones below, a chill spread from the top of his head to the bottom of his feet. Although I like to fly freely in the sky and on the ground, I do not have the hobby of visiting a land of death. The tragic scene in front of him made Yunoashing subconsciously pull his windbreaker. His strength of soul also slowly withdrew into his body, afraid that he would detect something that he should not have. In the desolate Death Valley, the white bone powder on the ground stirred up a white whirlwind because of the strong wind he brought along. The powder that seemed to represent millions of lives was actually wrapped up by the strong wind and flew out of the valley. The fluttering white powder also attracted Yin Nuashing's attention. His gaze followed the direction it was flying in, and he seemed to catch a faint hint of life between heaven and earth. At this moment, his eyes were dyed with a gorgeous color. As he looked in the direction the powder was flying, the two small arrays in front of him shrunk slightly. Yin Nuashing's field of vision also shrunk, allowing him to see extremely far away. He could even see a distance of several dozen li with a single glance. Furthermore, it was still extending into the distance. What he saw along the way was a deathly gray. Even the ground was black. There was not a single sound in the world, and there were no living creatures. Yin Nuashing saw a withered forest that had turned into a desolate mountain range. Occasionally, he could see many white bones below. They were all of different sizes and were all badly damaged. Some of them were even scattering powder. That scene would make even a tall and burly man shrink into a ball in fear. The deathly aura is vast and mighty, and there is no sign of life within 1,000 li. Just how many people have died in this valley to create such a scene? The more he looked, the more he felt that he was floating in a terrifying place. Although the deathly aura was perfect, his soul did not sense any danger. Yin Nuashing breathed a sigh of relief. His evil spirit eye continued to operate, sending his field of vision even further away. After extending his field of vision for an unknown period of time, Yin Nuashing felt a slight pain in his eyes. Only then did his evil spirit eye stop spreading. At this moment, his evil spirit eyes seemed to be operating at full strength. His field of vision seemed to be able to see several hundred li, or even 1,000 li away. In his field of vision, there was a spot of green that was particularly eye-catching. It was very far away on the horizon, but it was the only different color in this desolate place. It immediately attracted Yun Nuoxing's attention. A town. That rich life force was circulating in the air, resisting the deathly aura that was spreading over. It caused the latter, an existence that was far away from the source of energy, to feel a great resistance. It was actually blocked, and the place that could produce such a huge amount of life force, other than a town full of people, there was nothing else. The evil spirit eye slowly closed. When it opened again, it was a pair of excessively dull, pitch-black eyes. Yun Nuoxing looked at the town that was 1,000 li away, then looked at the death valley beneath his feet. Finally, he looked behind him. After muttering to himself for a while, he nodded. "Let's go and take a look. Since you want to play hide-and-seek with me, then I'll wait until you're anxious before going back. Staying in this place where the deathly aura is abundant is of no benefit to me." With a light snort, Yun Nuoxing curled his lips. Looking at the town before him, he flapped his 6 wings. Bursts of wind and thunder resounded. The gale carried his body and quickly swept towards the unknown town, light essence still slowly condensing under his feet. Chapter 158. A streak of golden light flashed across the sky at high speed. Specks of golden particles dissipated in the air, followed by a terrifying sound of wind and thunder. 1 or 2 tiny bolts of lightning could be seen streaking across the horizon. The 6 wings flapped from time to time, stirring up a storm that pushed Yun Nuoxing's body into the distance. The light particles entwined around his body increased his speed by several times. A distance of 1,000 miles would only take him a few minutes or even less. If he wanted to, he could cover it in an instant. With the light element, the distance wasn't a problem at all. Therefore, 2 minutes later, he arrived at the place where his line of sight had stopped. In the distant horizon, there was a speck of green. It was the only vibrant color in this grayish-yellow world. Even standing dozens of miles away, he could lock onto it with a single glance. Huff! Touching his forehead, Yun Nuoxing turned around to look at the place where he came from. The scene he saw along the way made him feel a lingering fear. Death, desolation, gray clouds cast by death energy, and white bones scattered all over the ground. Perhaps even hell wasn't as frightening as this scene. I feel like I've arrived at the 9th netherworld. Looking at the metallic clouds in the sky, Yun Nuoxing muttered in his heart. He couldn't be blamed for feeling this way. The boundless death energy was too unimaginable. Even if tens of millions or billions of people died here, after tens of thousands of years, or even tens of thousands of years, it should have dissipated from this world. The latest skeleton is also close to 6,000 years ago. Why is there still such a huge amount of death energy gathered here? Carefully recalling the land of death that covered 1,000 miles, Yun Nuoxing had a doubt in his heart. He didn't feel any taboo energy, nor did he feel anything that could gather the death energy there and prevent it from dissipating even after 6,000 years. However, he wasn't sure if this was the exact time. He didn't and wouldn't rummage through the pile of bones. He only roughly looked at it. The closest skeleton to him was the jade-like, slightly petite one. It had already been dead for close to 6,500 years. The specific time difference shouldn't exceed 500 years. After some consideration, he concluded that it was 6,000 years old. If I didn't have a light element, I'm afraid I would have ended up like that. Yun Nuoxing patted his chest and let out a long breath. The light element was yang and sacred, and Xian Yin had left a god's imprint in his body. The omnipresent death energy could hardly affect him, but if an ordinary person entered, it would be difficult for them to escape death. According to his guess, without the power of God, anyone who walked into this dangerous place would die. Even a low-level god would be greatly affected if he stood in the center of Death Valley. Perhaps we'll have to find the answer there. Looking at the city in the distance, Yin muttered to himself for a while before nodding his head. Light essence gushed out, faintly condensing under his feet. Just as he was about to rush towards the city in one breath, his complexion suddenly changed. A wave of chilliness rushed over, covering the sky and covering the earth, causing all the hairs on his body to stand on end. Roar! Yin turned his head abruptly and saw a black beast swooping down from the sky, roaring and pouncing towards him. Its 6 blood-red eyes revealed traces of brutality, and its ferocious mouth revealed a few rows of snow-white sharp teeth, causing him to shiver. If he was bitten by this thing, he would definitely not have a good ending. Scram! With an angry roar, the sky halberd shot out from his sleeve and was grasped in his hand. The brutal death energy pounced on his face, causing Yin to frown. He tightened his grip on the sky halberd, and with a soft roar, he fiercely slashed at the black beast that was pouncing towards him. The sky halberd that was suffused with silver light cut through the black beast, but it instantly pierced through it. The ferocious face brushed past Yin face at close range, causing his complexion to change slightly. He turned around and held the sky halberd horizontally in front of him, only to see the beast that had been cut into 2 suddenly shatter into a cloud of black mist and then disappear. Just now, that was seeing the beast dissipate into a cloud of black mist. Yin frowned and looked at the sky halberd in his hand suspiciously. When the halberd slashed across just now, it was as if it cut through the air, and he didn't feel anything at all. Even if this divine weapon could cut through iron like mud, it shouldn't have been like this. That was formed by the death energy. Thinking of this, Yin suddenly understood. In this country where the death energy reigned supreme, it was not impossible for the death energy that had been brewing for countless years to produce any changes. Even the birth of 1 or 2 strange creatures was understandable. I can't stay here for long. Sighing, Yin turned around to look behind him and didn't discover anything else. Only then did he let out a sigh of relief. His soul power slowly gushed out, curling around his body, and he cautiously retreated. Only when he saw that the ground below had turned from black to a normal yellow color did his gaze become focused. He suddenly turned around, and with a flash of light element, he instantly disappeared from where he was. And with Yin departure, this black land once again fell into silence, without a trace of sound. Yin had already put away the 6 wings. He came out of the land of death, dressed in black, with the appearance of the 6 wings. No matter how one looked at it, it was frightening. In this unfamiliar place, it was better to be careful. He didn't want to scare people as soon as he entered the city. I don't know where this place is. Where's Yuyin's city? I don't know if the purple night flames have erupted yet. F***, why am I so unlucky? Muttering in his heart, Yin finally cursed. He was a little angry. He had waited for nearly a year in Yuyin City, and now he was thrown into this godforsaken place. Moreover, he didn't even know where it was. Right, the map that Xianin gave me. Suddenly thinking of something, Yin was slightly delighted. He hurriedly stopped and searched the pendant with his soul power. He grasped his hand and took out the colorful scroll. He gently pulled it with his palm, but to his surprise, the scroll couldn't be opened. Moreover, no matter how much strength he used, it was difficult to open the scroll. The first time he used it, he could open it easily. This time, he couldn't even explain why he couldn't open it. He could only sigh and say, "Forget it, things will break." This map is engraved with the power of space, and it's a precise spatial coordinate map. I'm afraid it's easy to break. That's right, that's it. With a bitter smile, Yin put the scroll back into the pendant. His eyes locked onto the city. The light element flashed again, and he hurriedly rushed towards the city in the distance. Because he wasn't familiar with this place, Yin didn't dare to use the light element too much. He could only use it bit by bit. However, this was still quite fast. His black figure was almost pulled into a straight line, as if he was going to blend into the horizon. The towering dark green city wall was particularly eye-catching. It was full of vitality, as if infinite vitality was flowing within. On the sparkling and translucent walls, specks of green light were rotating on the surface. It looked indestructible, as if there was a huge barrier erected at the border between the land of life and the land of death, suppressing the spread of death. Just as he approached this city full of vitality, he saw two figures riding two magical beasts rapidly approaching. They wore light green robes and looked very refreshing. Even the two magical beasts beneath them were covered in sparkling green armor. Faint vitality was circulating, as if everything in this city was related to vitality. Forget it, I'll just fly over. After thinking for a while, Yin Nuoxing shook his head. He increased the output of the light element by a lot. His body turned into a golden ray of light and directly rushed between the two. Chi! A brilliant ray of light flitted between the two, causing the two green-robed youths to stare blankly. Just as they turned their heads, a gust of wind came from the front, blowing the two of them to the left and right. The two of them almost lost their balance and fell off their magical beasts. What's that? Ordinary people can't be that fast. The short-haired youth on the left stabilized himself on his magical beast and straightened his messy clothes. Then, he frowned and said to the other person, "Who knows? If it weren't for the fact that someone sensed something abnormal in the 1,000-kilometer danger zone and called us out to investigate, I wouldn't have come out." The other youth rolled his eyes and said with some disdain, "The 1,000-kilometer danger zone has been quiet for many years. It's said that the last attack of the undead army was 1,000 years ago. After that, there hasn't been any activity in the 1,000-kilometer danger zone. I wonder if it's already quiet." The short-haired youth sighed. "Since it's quiet, why are you so nervous? Isn't it just some activity? Who knows if it's a mistake?" The other man snorted. He seemed to be very unhappy about being suddenly sent out. The ancient spirit Sacred Metropolis is adjacent to the 1,000-kilometer danger zone. It's the closest border city to the 1,000-kilometer danger zone within a radius of 10,000 kilometers. It's normal for the higher-ups to have such a reaction. You seem to have forgotten about the past records. Anyone the big guys that came out of the 1,000-kilometer danger zone can cause the land to be covered in corpses. The short-haired youth shook his head. Then his eyes narrowed and he said in a deep voice, "All right, stop complaining. We'll just look in from 10 kilometers away. Don't get too close. If we get too close, even the ancient spirit robes won't be able to protect us." "TSK, I know. Really?" The other man shook his head and replied bitterly. Yin Nuoxing naturally didn't hear the conversation between the two. At that moment, he had already landed a few hundred meters away from the city. He carefully approached the road outside the city from the side of the forest. He looked left and right, but he didn't see anyone. However, this was normal. This road led to the death zone. Who would walk on this road for no reason? Not everyone had the courage to walk on this road. He carefully looked at the tall, green city wall from the forest. The gate leading to the death zone was closed. There were rows of soldiers in green armor standing on the city wall. They were filled with an austere aura, adding some masculinity to this boundless life force. Since I can't go through this gate, it seems that I have to go through another gate. Looking at the tightly closed gate and the soldiers on the city wall, Yin Nuoxing inwardly said. Soon after, he nodded and the light element brought Yin Nuoxing to the bottom of the city wall. Soon after, he carefully stuck to the city wall and moved towards the other side. Just like a thief, he carefully moved along the city wall. He didn't move at all. Using the light element, he carefully controlled the distance. After turning the corner with great difficulty, he saw that the side gate was still deserted. He couldn't help but sigh in disappointment. He could only strenuously move to the front gate. There's finally someone. Before he turned around, he heard a series of voices. Yin Nuoxing heaved a sigh of relief. This city was not considered small. He felt very helpless when he moved so close to the city walls. After turning a corner, he looked towards the city gate. Seeing that there were still quite a lot of people entering the city, Yin Nuoxing finally heaved a sigh of relief. His figure flickered a few times and walked in an arc. After a few flashes, he blended into the crowd. As for the people who were walking, they only glanced at the person who had suddenly appeared. Then, they turned their gazes away and continued chatting, pushing carts and riding horses. No one paid much attention to the person who had suddenly appeared. Yin Nuoxing's soul energy quietly spread out. Yin Nuoxing's ears perked up, hoping to hear some information about this unknown place in the God realm, about this land of death, and about this city that seemed to be guarding this land of death. What language is this? However, what made him feel like breaking down was that he couldn't understand what these people were saying at all. He could only hear the chattering of the people around him. Their voices sounded like human voices. They looked like humans. They walked like humans, and their auras were also human. In fact, they were humans, but they were speaking in a language that he couldn't understand at all. Isn't this terrible? Yin Nuoxing smiled bitterly. However, it seemed a little too late to retreat now. In just a short while, he had already followed the crowd to the city gate. It was too late to retreat now. However, since he was already here, he might as well take things as they came. He wasn't too worried. Looking ahead, Yin Nuoxing saw a few soldiers standing in front of those people. It seemed that everyone who entered the city had to be checked. However, they only stared at those people in front of them. They didn't say anything, nor did they give any indication. After a while, they let the people who were surrounded in through the gate. Then, they walked forward to block the people behind them. They stood there like logs for a while before letting them pass. Divine sense inspection? Soul inspection? Huh? Or what the hell? Yin Nuoxing was completely confused. Just as he was secretly guessing, the person in front of him had already entered. As for the 5 soldiers, all of their gazes turned towards him, causing him to involuntarily raise his eyebrows. Without saying anything, he took large strides forward and walked into the encirclement of the 5 soldiers. After that, he stopped. Immediately after, he felt 5 types of probing energy sweep over his body. Only then did Yin Nuoxing understand. The probing powers swept across every inch of his body, from head to toe, including the pendant on his body. However, they didn't drill into his body to probe him. This made him heave a sigh of relief. It wasn't a big deal for one person to probe him. However, with the strength of Yin Nuoxing, he could ignore them. After a while, Yin Nuoxing felt 2 probing powers disappear. The 2 soldiers standing in front nodded and made way. Yin Nuoxing secretly heaved a sigh of relief and walked toward the city gate. So voila! Just as Yin Nuoxing took a step forward, he heard an incomprehensible voice behind him. Then, 2 palms suddenly landed on his shoulders. His heart thumped. He couldn't help but laugh dryly in his heart. It seemed that something had happened. Chapter 159. Yin Nuoxing chuckled bitterly in his heart when he felt the 2 strong palms on his shoulders. At the same time, he felt a little strange. He wasn't panicking, his breathing wasn't erratic, his gaze was normal, and his attire was normal. Even the 2 soldiers in front of him made way for him. So why was he stopped? He was confident that he didn't give himself away. When Yin Nuoxing was stopped, the people behind him walked closer curiously. They stretched their necks and looked at Yin Nuoxing and the 5 soldiers with different expressions in their eyes. The 2 soldiers who made way for them were also stunned. They looked at each other and felt a little confused. However, they thought that the other 3 might have felt that something was wrong, so they didn't say anything. Gu Lucy. Before Yin Nuoxing could figure out what was going on, the person behind him continued to speak. That strange language made him completely confused. However, even if he didn't understand it, it didn't mean that others didn't understand it. When a strange voice fell, Yin Nuoxing clearly felt the group of people behind him change slightly. However, he was still confused. However, those gazes weren't filled with hatred or as if they were looking at a treasure. It was more like they were looking at a monkey. Letting out a sigh, Yin Nuoxing turned around and saw the burly man in front of him. His face was filled with impatience. His arms, which were as thick as 2 people's arms, were wriggling nonstop. His mouth was open, but no one knew what he was saying. As for the 2 people who were pressing down on his shoulders, their faces were ferocious, as if they would tear him apart in the next moment. At this critical moment, Yin Nuoxing rolled his eyes and suddenly thought of something. He nodded fiercely in his heart. Then, he looked at the burly man who had been staring at him and smiled slightly. He bowed, pointed at his ears and mouth with his fingers, turned around twice, shook his head, and finally shrugged helplessly. Seeing Yin Nuoxing's gesture, the burly man was also stunned. He frowned and immediately seemed to understand. His large fist smashed onto his palm and emitted a clear sound. The impatience on his face also disappeared slightly. Immediately, he smiled and waved his hand towards the other two. The latter also understood and withdrew his hand, which was placed on Yin Nuoxing's shoulder. As the two huge palms moved away, Yin Nuoxing felt as if two mountains had disappeared. He smiled bitterly. That force had almost crushed his bones. The burly man in front of him stretched out his palm, which was the size of a praying mat, in front of Yin Nuoxing. Then, with a thought, a green energy slowly emerged from his palm. As soon as this green energy appeared, Yin Nuoxing felt that the surrounding space was filled with vitality. The aura of life is a little like the wood element. Yin Nuoxing tilted his head and looked at the burly man in confusion. When the burly man saw this, he gave a look to the other people. They understood and also stretched out their palms. Green energy rose from their palms like swaying flames. However, it wasn't the heat of the fire element that permeated the air. Instead, it was the aura of life. Looking around, Yin Nuoxing saw the aura of life rising from each of their palms that made him feel refreshed. He realized that the color of the energy that contained the aura of life was different. Some of them were dark, while some were light. The color of the energy on the hand of the burly man who had spoken to him at the beginning was the darkest. It was close to the dark green level and contained more energy. After looking around, Yin Nuoxing seemed to have realized something. He smiled slightly and slid his white palm out of his long sleeves. He stretched it out in front of the burly man. His eyelids drooped slightly, and with a thought, a pure, sparkling and translucent dark green energy rose from his palm like a crystal. The rich aura of life from the wood element immediately spread out. It was like a green wave that swept through the space. The people dozens of meters outside the city gate could feel this majestic life force. They immediately raised their heads and looked forward, not knowing what had happened in front of them. Seeing such a pure aura of life, surprise appeared in the eyes of the 5 soldiers. As for the group of onlookers, their eyes flickered with a strange light. Yin Nuoxing noticed these changes in their expressions. He seemed to understand that the wood element was very important in this place, or in other words, the aura of life. However, after thinking about it, Yin Nuoxing could understand. Just a few dozen kilometers away, there was a death zone that covered a radius of 1,000 kilometers. Moreover, when he came out of the death zone, he saw a wild beast formed by the energy of death. The energy of death and the energy of life were two opposing energies. Using life to fight death was a good choice. However, at the same time, the enormous energy of death could also suppress the energy of life. Something must have happened in the past that made the people here value the cultivation of life. However, this was what Yin Nuoxing guessed from their eyes and the death zone. He didn't know the specifics. After a while, the burly man finally came back to his senses. He coughed dryly and looked at Yin Nuoxing with a strange gaze. He opened his mouth a few times, but in the end, he bitterly smiled. He forgot that Yin Nuoxing couldn't hear him, but he didn't dare ask anything. He quickly cupped his fists towards Yin Nuoxing and made a pleased gesture towards the city gate. There was a hint of respect in his eyes, which stunned Yin Nuoxing. He didn't want to waste any more time and cupped his fists towards the burly man. Then, he smiled at the other 4 and slowly walked into the city. Seeing Yin Nuoxing walk into the city, the burly man bitterly smiled and said, "Such pure life, energy. Could it be that some upper-class person has come to the ancient spirit holy capital to explore the death zone?" One of the 2 people holding Yin Nuoxing whispered into the burly man's ear, "Captain, what do you think?" "Don't worry about it. I stopped him because I couldn't sense his life force. I didn't think that this mysterious boy would have such a strong life force. People like him don't like people probing him. Besides, he didn't offend us. Let's just forget about it. The big man shook his head. But Captain, how could someone with such dense life energy be disabled? The person frowned. If his life energy was so pure, he could heal any injury with a thought. How could there be a scar on his body? Who knows? Maybe it's something he wants to engrave in his heart. A scar or something like that from a battle. Leaving a scar to remind himself. Didn't we have such a person in our team back then? He could grow a severed arm with just a thought, but he kept it for a few years, waiting for his revenge to restore it to its original state. The burly man pondered for a while and said, "Whatever. If something really happened, it's not something we can do about it. Let the big shots in the holy capital worry about it." Once he finished speaking, he waved his hand without waiting for the others to react. He turned around and cried out to those people who were still watching curiously. Immediately, the bodies of those people trembled. They hurriedly lined up and walked into the city one by one. Yin Nuashing didn't know what the burly man and the others were thinking, and he didn't care. He was just a passerby, a tourist from a foreign country. He didn't know why he had come to this damn place and listened to the people around him talk in a language he didn't understand. Even the style of the buildings in the city was very different. At a glance, everything was bright green, as if he had entered a green country. This city has such dense life energy. Even the materials used in the buildings are related to the wood element. This should be related to the death zone. After pondering for a while, Yin Nuashing shook his head. This wasn't something he should be concerned about. He only wanted to know where this place was, where Yuyin City was, and how much time had passed. After thinking for a while, Yin Nuashing sighed bitterly. He looked at a very gentle-looking young man on the street and quickly walked up, stopping him and cupping his hands. The man was startled by Yin Nuashing's sudden appearance. After calming down, he saw Yin Nuashing gesticulating with all his might. He couldn't help but frown, but he didn't interrupt him. Instead, he just watched Yin Nuashing gesticulate. After a while, his mind became more and more chaotic. He couldn't understand what Yin Nuashing was gesticulating. The young man spread out his hands. Yin Nuashing smiled bitterly in frustration. Soon after, his soul power gushed out, and he spoke to the young man with his divine sense. However, the latter looked at him with a confused expression and shook his head. He looked at Yin Nuashing, who wanted to cry but had no tears. With a strange expression, he thought, "Is this guy not from this area? He doesn't even speak the same language." Clasping his hands towards the young man, Yin Nuashing walked away in disappointment. However, he was caught by the young man, causing him to be stunned. Turning his head, he saw the young man curiously looking at him a few more times. Only then did the young man nod his head. He stretched out his hand and pointed towards a tall tower in the city. After that, he pointed to his mouth, then pointed to his ears. Finally, he gave Yin Nuashing a resolute look. After that, he patted his shoulder and silently walked away. Watching the young man walk away, Yin Nuashing couldn't help but sigh. Soon after, he said to himself with a bitter smile, I can't even communicate with my divine sense because of the language barrier. This can't be. This shouldn't be. There are some ancient scrolls that don't need to be read. I can read the information in them with my divine sense. Why can't I communicate with them daily?" After smiling bitterly for a while, Yin Nuashing's expression turned serious. He turned his gaze. The young man had just pointed at the tall tower. Could it be that he could help him there? Although the tower was called a tower, it was more like a huge inverted funnel. The bottom was very wide, and at the top of the funnel, there were many twig-like thorns protruding from it. The tower was 1,000 feet tall and looked like a piece of crystal-clear jade. It was built in the upper left corner of the city. Majestic vitality was blown to every corner of the city by the breeze. If one stayed here for a long time, they would feel that their state of mind was cleansed. At the very least, the people who lived here rarely got sick. There's an energy barrier. However, Yin Nuashing still saw some things that ordinary people couldn't see with his evil spirit eye. For example, there was a huge light green energy barrier that looked like a huge bowl covering the entire city. The energy barrier was generated from the huge inverted funnel. He could see that the energy barrier occasionally splashed out energy ripples from the top of the tower. Scratching his head, Yin Nuashing was still a little distressed. He didn't know what that huge tower was for. His first impression was that it was a guardian of the city. That should be where the city lord stayed. Yin Nuashing couldn't afford to offend someone of that level. If possible, he didn't want to come into contact with someone of that level too early. I'd better go take a look. However, this thought was thrown away after a moment. Yin Nuashing nodded fiercely and walked towards the huge dark green tower. The most important thing now was the purple night flame. Every second he hesitated was a second wasted. He had to hurry back. The purple night flame was at its most unstable state. He didn't know when it would erupt. He had to wait there. Boom! However, just as Yin Nuashing took a step forward, his heart suddenly hurt. It was as if a heavy hammer had fiercely struck his chest. His handsome face couldn't help but turn red. Soon after, he felt that the gravity around him seemed to have suddenly increased. Under that huge force, even his vision became a lot blurrier. His firm waist couldn't help but bend down. The sudden and terrifying pressure stunned him for a moment. Soon after, a furious roar came from his mouth. Under that terrifying pressure, Yin Nuashing clenched his teeth and forced himself not to bend down. His face was flushed red because of this. However, the people around him didn't seem to notice anything strange. His furious roar didn't attract anyone's attention. Those people walked past him and didn't even turn their eyes. It felt as if they couldn't see Yin Nuashing. It also felt as if he was abandoned by the world. However, he had just spoken to that young man. Boom! A loud, muffled sound suddenly came from his mind. It shook his spirit. A muffled groan came from his throat. His vision was so blurry that he almost couldn't see anything clearly. Yin Nuashing clenched his teeth tightly. His fists were clenched so tightly that creaking sounds could be heard. There was a trace of unwillingness in his eyes. He had just entered and hadn't even asked for any clues. Was he going to die here? Damn it! Yin Nuashing roared angrily at the sky. He clenched his fists with all his might. A silver blue light quickly gathered in his hands. He couldn't accept this. He couldn't fall down like this. However, before Ling Hong's sword could be pulled out, an even more intense mental energy attack directly crashed into his mind. That huge impact caused his head to jerk back violently. The pair of dim eyes, with a little bit of unwillingness and stubbornness, finally slowly closed. Ling Hong Jian, a furious roar, suddenly came from the room. The sunlight that shone and shrank slightly because of this roar. Then, a vast spatial energy fluctuation came from the room, causing the surrounding void to tremble slightly. It seemed as if it would shatter at any time. The young man on the bed suddenly opened his eyes. A beam of light that contained boundless spatial energy shot out from his eyes and pierced a huge hole in the room. He bounced up from the bed. His eyes were filled with confusion and unwillingness. The hand that was holding Ling Hongjian trembled unconsciously. Large droplets of sweat rolled down his forehead. His chest rose and fell rapidly. He looked as if he had just had a nightmare. Chapter 160. In a snow-white room, a square four-legged incense burner was placed beside the bed. Wisps of incense wafted out of it, quietly dissolving the anxiety in the air. Outside the wide, open window, soft clouds floated. Occasionally, one or two clouds would accidentally enter the room through the window and dissipate into water vapor. Huff! Huff! Yin Nuashing bounced up from the bed. His chest was still rising and falling rapidly, and he was still panting heavily. When he saw this somewhat familiar scene, he was stunned for a moment. The confusion and unwillingness in his eyes gradually faded away, and in its place was an even greater doubt. A dream? But it's too real. That touch, that feeling, it's no different from my own experience. Yin Nuashing pressed his palm against his chest and took a few deep breaths. He slowly calmed down, but his mind was in turmoil. That land of death, That energy of death that enveloped 1,000 miles, that hidden basin, that thriving town, all of this was unusually real. It was so real that he didn't suspect that it was a dream at all. Glancing at the Ling Hong sword in his hand, which was flashing with blue light, Yin Nuoxing casually threw it to the side. However, he nervously grabbed it back and placed it horizontally on his lap. An inexplicable uneasiness filled his heart, but holding this godly sword made him feel slightly more at ease. That's right, the map. Yin Nuoxing suddenly remembered that he couldn't open the colorful scroll in the land of death. He raised his head slightly and waved his hand to take it out. However, this time, he gently pulled it open with both hands. In a huge map of the realm of the gods, in the Source Peak region, that red dot flickered faintly beside the purple flame, making him even more depressed. He flipped the map of the realm of the gods over and over again, but he couldn't see anything unusual. This made him sigh again. Could it be that that place can't be opened? Flipping the pendant around his neck, Yin Nuoxing sighed heavily and muttered, "But since that place allowed me to take out the item in the pendant, then it's definitely not a dream. But how do you explain that I'm here now? I want to go back and take a look." After letting her imagination run wild for a while, Yin Nuoxing's eyes narrowed, and she put away the map. Just as she was about to lie down, she saw the door being kicked open by a slender leg. Immediately, a few figures rushed in like the wind. She immediately recognized the red clothes, the burgundy short hair, and the two purple figures. Feather. When Yin Nuoxing saw who it was, she was slightly delighted. Just as she opened her mouth to speak, she felt her vision blur. She felt a pain in her chest, and her body slammed onto the bed. She couldn't help but groan in pain as she struggled to crawl out of her mouth. When she fixed her gaze, she saw Yin, who was dressed in a fiery red dress, using her knee to hit his chest. Her entire body was on top of him as she stared down at him from above. There seemed to be flames spewing out of her main mouth. "Sister Yin, your sword." Yishi stood at the side and silently took out a silver sword that was more than 2 meters long. Then, she obediently handed it to Yin. The latter calmly took it. Mei Mao stared at Yin Nuoxing fiercely. She held the sword hilt in one hand and stretched out 3 slender fingers of her other hand to gently stroke the long sword. She said with a faint smile, "My stupid brother, what did I tell you, gulp?" Yin Nuoxing shuddered. His handsome face was a little pale. When he saw Yin's furious look, he couldn't help but tremble and say, What a strong, murderous aura." He naturally knew what Yin was talking about. His sister was unhappy that he came back, lying down several times. However, he couldn't do anything about it. He was the one who started these things. He didn't want things that no one wanted to see to happen because of him. Moreover, there were some things that he could do, so he naturally couldn't back down. Cough. I was wrong. Yin Nuoxing bitterly laughed. The expression on his handsome face changed as he looked at Yin with a pitiful expression. That appearance caused a cold smile to appear on the latter's face. Clang! A silver light flashed. The long sword directly stabbed into the pillow next to Yin Nuoxing's head. The sharp sword light was right next to his forehead. In that instant, he was so scared that he broke out in cold sweat. Her lily-white hand fumbled around behind her for a while. Then, she grabbed the 2-meter-long silver blue needle. The long sword, which was emitting terrifying spatial fluctuations, was pointed at Yin Nuoxing's head. The dry smile on his face completely turned into a bitter smile. "Humph. See if you still don't take my words seriously. Next time, I'll directly use this treasure of yours to stab into your head." Seeing that his handsome face was completely pale, Yin pouted coquettishly and pulled out her long sword. Ling Hongjian was also gently placed to the side. She moved her knees away from his chest and sat on the side of the bed. She turned her face away and did not even look at him. Yin Nuoxing laughed bitterly. He could only laugh bitterly now. No matter what he said, it was wrong, big brother. Ming and Little Purple Soul, who were standing obediently at the side, were overjoyed when they saw that Yin had let him off just like that. They climbed onto the bed on all fours, turned over, and laid down on Yin Nuoxing. They looked at him with smiles, and his heart warmed. He stroked the heads of the two little girls and smiled. Big Brother Nuo, you've been sleeping for 2 months. However, when Yishi's words floated out, the smile on Yun Nuoxing's face froze. He secretly glanced at Yuan, who was still angry. He couldn't help but shake his head. No wonder big sister Yuan was so angry. So this was the reason. That night, in the courtyard of the sacred weapon shrine, he had forcibly activated the soul-burning technique to 4 times its normal power. Then he used Ling Hongjian. That kind of overdraft was undoubtedly destructive to him. His soul flame was almost extinguished. Yishi and Jin Wang were so anxious that even Yuan, who was a very strong woman, couldn't help but cry. The sacred weapon array. After thinking for a while, these 4 words jumped out of his mouth as if it was a conditioned reflex. Yin Nuoxing's face froze, and he quickly covered his mouth. He secretly looked at Yuan. As expected, he saw the latter glaring at him fiercely. He couldn't help but laugh bitterly in his heart. Don't worry. Yishi patted Yin Nuoxing's head and couldn't help but shake her head. This guy really thinks that everything is fine as long as he's not dead. He's always risking his life. Every time. He doesn't even think about the feelings of the people standing behind him who care about him. Of course, he doesn't want any accidents to happen to anyone. However, would they feel good if they saw something happen to him? After Big Brother Noah used Ling Hongjian to shatter that forbidden weapon, King Xingluo at the sacred weapon shrine also lost his ability to fight. In the end, he knocked those old fellows unconscious and forcefully searched their souls. He found the sacred weapon shrine's array and erased their memories, Yishi said casually. However, Yin Nuoxing felt a wave of fear. If those 8 Shunming experts who were forcefully promoted had really fought with their lives, they would have made Jin Wang and the others pay a great price. In the end, they still knocked Feng Yin and the others unconscious and forcefully searched their souls. If they weren't careful during the process, their souls might have been damaged. Of course, Yin Nuoxing didn't have any feelings for the people from the sacred weapon shrine. He didn't like them or hate them. It was only because he coveted their sacred weapon array that they had a conflict. If he hadn't heard Jin Wang say that the 9 deities shrine and the sacred weapon shrine were in a hostile state, he would have felt guilty. However, since they were enemies, the only psychological burden he had was gone. When Big Brother Nuo completely recovers, I'll give you the sacred weapon array. Now, it's better for Big Brother Nuo to recuperate. Injuries to the soul can't be healed by sleeping for a while. Yishi sighed. An injury to one's soul was different from adding scars to one's body. If one did not have a special method of recuperation, one would have to recuperate for a long time. It was even possible that one would not be able to recover. However, for Yin Nuoxing, who was full of elixirs, he was not worried about this. Yin Nuoxing nodded his head. Just as he was about to take out the medicinal pill, a sudden thunderous roar caused his body to tremble in fright. Soon after, his gaze looked out of the window, only to see that the sky was still bright and beautiful, causing him to be slightly stunned. This is the resonance of the atmosphere. Some element in the world has caused the power of the world to become chaotic. After sensing it slightly, Yin Nuoxing's expression became somewhat strange. This kind of phenomenon would only occur when the energy of one element increased to the point that it caused the balance between the 9 elements to be lost. Even if he didn't use his mind to sense it, he could feel that the entire space was rumbling, as if the world was collapsing. Yishi was also startled by this unforeseen event. Her gaze flickered as she looked at Yin Nuoxing, but she didn't say anything. Yuan also remained silent, while Mei Mao unconsciously looked out of the window. Seeing that they were all silent, Yin Nuoxing scratched his head and yawned. Just as he was about to go back to sleep, he suddenly thought of something. Bang! Just as he thought of it, the entire space and even the mountains suddenly trembled. This time, Yin Nuoxing, who was completely awake, immediately discovered the source of the fluctuation. His pitch-black eyes abruptly looked towards the entrance of the room. That was the direction of Yuyan City. The fluctuation from Yuyan City Through the door, Yin Nuoxing's pitch-black eyes seemed to be able to see Yuyan City thousands of miles away. This was the first time in a year that something had happened in Yuyan City, or rather, in the sky above Yuyan City. The purple night dark flame is about to erupt. In the past 2 months, its movements have become more and more intense. The condensed fire elements have even leaked out of the ceiling array. Brother Nuo also had the foresight to move the manor out. If we were still in Yuyan City, I wouldn't be able to eat or sleep well. Amidst the shock, Yishi also knew that she couldn't hide it from him, so she slowly explained. In the past 2 months, Yuyan City could be said to be extremely chaotic. Originally, this place was adjacent to Xingming City, which was the center of Sourcepeak region. All the major regions, and even the Divine Prefecture, had teleportation portals that led to this place. The matter of the purple night dark flame was a little exaggerated. It had already spread throughout the entire God realm a long time ago. Now that there was such a fluctuation for the first time, the number of people coming and going increased by dozens of times. Now in Yuyan City, there's only chaos left. Even God-level experts had fallen. At this moment, the purple night dark flame had yet to erupt. If it really did, who knew what kind of apocalyptic situation it would be? Looking in the direction of Yuyan City with uncertainty, Yin Nuoxing became even more worried after hearing Yi Shi's explanation. The situation of this trip was out of his control. There were several times more God-level experts, and there were even hundreds and thousands of God-level experts. With so many people in such a chaotic situation, he didn't know if he could still approach the purple night dark flame. Wang, the terrifying energy fluctuation, after a long period of transmission, finally spread to the manor of the 9 deities' palace. Yin Nuoxing's expression changed slightly. Faintly, he seemed to sense an extremely terrifying aura that contained the power to destroy heaven and earth. It was like a sleeping dragon that was slowly awakening. Yuyan City has existed since the end of the ancient era. In the past 100 billion years, trillions of years, more than 50 epochs, more than 50 trillion years, almost 60 trillion years. Although that array has isolated a large amount of energy, the purple night dark flame has still gathered an extremely large amount of energy. That energy is enough to destroy the God realm. Feeling this abnormally terrifying and tyrannical energy that could destroy intelligence, Yishi's petite body couldn't help but tremble. Just how terrifying is it? Seeing that even Yishi was afraid, Yin Nuoxing couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. He was wondering if this trip was the wrong choice. Ordinary people can't sense it. Even God-level experts and God-level experts can't sense it. That higher-level divinity fluctuation, Yishi murmured with a trembling voice, causing Yin Nuoxing's head to explode. It was as if a bomb had been detonated. Higher-level divinity fluctuation. In other words, peak God Emperor. Chapter 161. Inin, how long is a person's life? How long is a cultivator's life? How long will a god live? The realm of the gods is different from other worlds. Mortals have a lifespan of 200 to 500 years. Mortals have a lifespan of up to 1,000 years. Immortals have a lifespan of close to 10,000 years. And demons have a lifespan of 100,000 years. As for gods, their lifespan is very long, ranging from 1,000,000 years to 100 billion years. As for gods, Xianyin was silent for a moment. Then she smiled sweetly and said, "The lifespan of gods is measured in epochs. But gods will also die one day. But that time will be very long, very long. A person's life, even a cultivator's life, is very short. 1,000 years, 1,000,000 years, it will pass in the blink of an eye for gods, but for gods, 10 billion years, 100 billion years, it will also pass in the blink of an eye. In the time it takes to look back, the world has already changed. The endless starry sky can't escape the constraints of time. The lifespan of a star is also from 1,000,000 to 100 billion years. Who said that the starry sky is endless? Who said that gods are eternal and reincarnated, burying all living things in the 8 realms? He still remembered what Xian Yin said to him. However, Yin Nuoxing still couldn't experience the concept of 1,000,000 or 100 billion years. He felt that every day was very long, and it had only been a few years since he fell into the desert. Seeing Yin Nuoxing looking over with a confused expression, Yishi couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. That's right, without personally experiencing that long period of time, how would he know how long it was? Reincarnation of the heavenly Tao, the alternation of yin and yang. When one reaches the peak of prosperity, there will be a decline. In the world of cultivators, a period of prosperity and decline is a period of time, but this definition is very vague. In the ancient records, the shortest period of a period of time is only 1,000,000 years, and the longest period is as long as a few epochs, Yishi said faintly. Yin Nuoxing smiled bitterly and shook his head. These big concepts of time could only be understood after truly experiencing this long period of time. Let's go out and take a look, Yin Nuoxing said softly, then immediately sat up and turned over to get off the bed. Seeing him like this, Yu Yin and the others could only sigh helplessly. After all, no one could stop him from doing what he wanted to do. Don't worry, I won't die. I'm very lucky. Yin Nuoxing couldn't help but comfort them when she saw their gloomy faces. Yu Yin rolled her eyes. Anyway, she only knew that Yin Nuoxing could make big things sound like small things, and small things sound like nothing. In this aspect, his words were not trustworthy at all. A terrifying roar reverberated between the heavens and the earth, as if a prehistoric beast was releasing a tremendous pressure in Yuyan City. Small whirlpools appeared in the void between the heavens and the earth. There were even black cracks that had not yet closed. The space within a radius of 10,000 miles around Yuyan City was very unstable. The space was already in a state of tension. If any energy were to strike it at this moment, it would definitely shatter a large area of the space. On a mountain peak thousands of kilometers away, there were no longer any clouds in the sky. They had all been torn to shreds by the shock waves from before. Yin Nuoxing stood at the edge of the cliff and looked at the spacious sky. He could only see spatial whirlpools spinning in the sky. Chaotic spatial energy covered every inch of the area within 10,000 kilometers of Yuyan City. The fire element is so dense. The density has increased by at least 10 times. Silently opening his evil spirit eye, what he saw was a fiery red world. This was the scene that he had seen on his first day in Yuyan City. But now, this situation had spread out, and even the area outside Yuyan City was not spared. In fact, even the place they were in was covered in fire element. If the array collapsed, any place with fire element would be covered in purple night flames. Thinking of this, Yin Nuoxing couldn't help but look at the array. He was stunned for a moment and said in a grave voice, "That array with life is about to appear." "It's about to appear?" Yu Yin was stunned. She had seen that array before. It was very strange. It would automatically disintegrate and reassemble. The number of arrays that were activated was not just in the thousands. It was an array that could be reassembled infinitely. Yes, with the power of the evil spirit eye, I can see the array that I saw in the spirit formation world. Right now, the array that my evil spirit eye is seeing is a little blurry. I reckon that it won't be long before it rushes out of the spirit formation world. At that time, there will be a small explosion. Yin Nuoxing nodded. His left eye gradually returned to its original pitch black color. His right eye was still open with the evil spirit eye. He could even see that the array in his right eye was becoming more and more blurry. As for his left eye, he could see an extremely faint shadow. An array with life? Yishi was a bit puzzled. She pulled on Yin Nuoxing's sleeve and asked curiously. Yin Nuoxing smiled. He embraced her and pressed his hand on Yishi's right eye. Instantly, the latter's left eye became as resplendent as the former's right eye. The instant their gazes changed, they saw the so-called array with life. Thousands of arrays interweaved into a spherical array that encompassed 10,000 miles of the sky. Moreover, every single array was unceasingly changing and reassembling. The energy matrices, the array cores, and the patterns were all changing at a dizzying speed. It's this. Seeing the array that was unceasingly changing, some astonishment appeared on Yi Shi's little face. As a spirit formation grandmaster, she also knew about that array. Of course, it was only limited to the level of understanding. Divine Restriction Array. After a short moment, for words filled with astonishment were spat out from her little mouth, causing Yin Nuoxing's expression to greatly change. Divine Restriction Array. He had only heard of this name before. It was ranked below the 9th grade Divine Rank Ceiling Array and was known for its treacherous array, Divine Restriction Array. Divine Restriction. Sigh. No wonder the evil spirit I was useless. Hearing that, Yin Nuoxing could not help but bitterly smile. No wonder the evil spirit I was unable to analyze it. This was the first time he was helpless against an array. Of course, not to mention a divine restriction, with his current strength, he could not even analyze a ceiling array. Just as the two of them were astonished, another world-shaking rumble rang out from Yuyan City, accompanied by an intense ripple. Furthermore, the ripple this time was unprecedentedly strong, causing Yin Nuoxing and the others to hastily retreat and squat down. Even from 1,000 miles away, they could feel a great deterrence from the terrifying ripple. Oh, there's only fire elemental energy left within 10,000 miles of Yuyan City. There's not even much wind elemental energy left, and it can barely be used to fly. He hastily sat on the ground. The intense trembling caused the spatial cracks that had already filled the air to rupture and rapidly spread to other places. The longest spatial crack was above Yuyan City. It was a pitch-black crack that stretched for 10,000 miles, and it was like a huge mouth that could devour people. Bang! Just as he was looking at the extremely long spatial crack, the entire sky trembled once again, and the mountain below him also shook violently. The magnitude was so great that Yin Nuoxing could not help but worry whether it would collapse just like that. Look, above Yuyan City. Amidst the intense trembling, Yi Shi, who was in his arms, cried out in alarm and pointed at the empty sky with her little finger. Yin Nuoxing also hastily looked over and saw a speck of azure quietly appear in the sky. It was a very small speck, but it had the power to attract the entire world. When that speck of azure light appeared, the rumbling between heaven and earth gradually calmed down. Looking at the forest below, more than half of it had been snapped in half. The spatial trembling just now was like an earthquake, and many cracks had quietly opened on the ground, extending from Yuyan City to the end of their line of sight. Whoa! The moment the trembling stopped, the spatial crack that ran through Yuyan City suddenly emitted a spatial fluctuation that even Yi Shi was shocked. The power of space suddenly became violent, and the people in Yuyan City were the closest to the location of the explosion. The destructive fluctuations caused everyone's faces to turn pale, and an extremely comical scene appeared. Under the deterrence of the terrifying power of space, those experts who had traveled day and night to reach Yuyan City with great difficulty all hurriedly ran out of the city. They did not even have the time to pack up the things they had left behind in Yuyan City. It was as if the god of death was chasing after them. Apart from those cultivators, even ordinary people hurriedly packed up. Everyone seemed to be fleeing for their lives, desperately trying to leave Yuyan City. Sect Master, elders, and the others haven't returned yet. In the sky above Yuyan City, on a floating platform less than 1,000 meters away from the giant crack, there was a powerhouse with a vigorous aura. It was another divine dark powerhouse. However, as this divine dark powerhouse raised his head to look at the crack in the sky, his face paled. Under such a terrifying strength, he felt as if he were nothing more than an ant. Not yet. Shouldn't we also leave? If we continue to stay here, it will be dangerous. Another youth's face was also pale. Looking down at the crowd that was running away like soldiers on a battlefield, he could not help but sigh. Yuyan City is about to be destroyed. Run. No matter where we are, run first. We can't stay here any longer. The wind element has been sealed. We can't fly out. We're dead. The Shinming young man couldn't help but sigh when he saw this chaotic state that seemed like the end of the world. The other young man frowned as he looked at the former and said, "Aren't we going to intervene? Take care? How? How are you going to take care of thousands of wild horses?" The divine dark youth glanced at him and indifferently said, "Let's also retreat. In a while, the sky will be controlled by the fire element. If the purple night dark flame truly erupts, it will be easier for us to escape." After saying that, he looked at the others on the platform and nodded. Then he jumped off the platform. Seeing this, the others hurriedly jumped off the platform. Bang! Crack! Just as they retreated from the platform, the spatial crack that had been quietly emitting ripples suddenly trembled. Soon after, a low and deep sound seemed to resound from the depths of everyone's soul, causing their hearts to violently jump. An unusual and frightening pressure caused everyone's hands and feet to involuntarily tremble. Just as the low and deep sound rang out, the black crack suddenly expanded. Resplendent light was faintly discernible. Then a spatial storm that was tens of thousands of feet in size swept out from the crack with a bang. As the spatial storm expanded, a bright azure pillar of light shot out from the center of the storm, pushing the entire crack open. A large empty space appeared behind the spatial storm. Such a terrifying scene caused Yin Nuoshing to involuntarily whistle. The spatial storm that spread out swept across the horizon, shattering some of the buildings in Yuyan City. The forest within 1,000 miles of Yuyan City was also flattened into an endless expanse of flat land at this moment. The ground was so flat that there was not the slightest obstruction. Those divine experts who were slow to escape in the sky were instantly turned into nothingness, not even leaving behind a single trace of them. Seeing how terrifying the spatial storm was, those who had escaped quickly paled and patted their chests, rejoicing that they had reacted quickly enough. "It's coming out. Stabilize yourselves." Yin Nuoshing let out a low roar. Her 6 wings suddenly spread open as she hugged Yuyin, Ming, and the others. Golden chains shot out from under her windbreaker and wrapped around their waists. After doing this, her eyes faintly flickered. When she raised her head, she saw the extremely brilliant light shrink slightly before suddenly expanding. It was as if a star had exploded. Set up the formation. Open the Great Formation. Protect Yuyan City. The Shinming youth had already landed on the ground. When he saw that most of the ordinary people were still in Yuyan City, he could not help but frown. A stern roar rapidly spread throughout Yuyan City. Subsequently, his hands danced with lightning speed. Numerous hand seals transformed into runes that charged into the ground. A moment later, a pillar of light that contained terrifying energy suddenly shot out from the ground and shot into the air. Soon after, a golden barrier slowly appeared beside the pillar of light. Set up the formation. Just as he was about to make his move, dozens of shouts could be heard from other parts of Yuyan City. Shortly after, beams of energy shot up into the sky, all at the same height. Dozens of different energies simultaneously formed a barrier and connected together. In just a few breaths of time, a huge energy barrier was formed, enveloping the entire Yuyan City. Boom! Just as the energy barrier was formed, a shockwave that contained a frightening amount of spatial energy struck the ground like a meteorite. That wild and violent energy carried an extremely frightening speed as it violently spread out. In an instant, it descended upon the energy barrier. "Huh, old man, let us help too." The unparalleled shockwave caused the entire energy barrier to rapidly ripple. The youth and the others who were maintaining the formation groaned and could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. However, they still stubbornly held on. Moreover, there were other experts who were also maintaining the formation. If one looked closely, one would discover that among these experts, there was the old man with a golden snake and the strange old man that Yin Nuoshing had met before. When the Abyss Shrine attacked, they had also helped. "Hold on," the youth roared. The veins on his arms bulged, and his mouth opened so wide that an apple could be stuffed in. Even with so many people attacking at the same time, the energy barrier still did not collapse. Outside Yuyan City, the shockwave even set off a wave of gravel on the ground in the distance. Seeing the shockwave rapidly approaching, Yun Nuashing took in a deep breath as he poured out all the divine artifact from his pendant and placed them in front of him. The shockwave also arrived unexpectedly, causing him to hurriedly close his eyes as he hugged the person in his arms and involuntarily put more strength into her embrace. Boom! Chapter 162. Rumble. It was as if the heavens and earth were shaking, and the ear-piercing rumble of thunder reverberated in his ears. The violent impact made Yun Nuashing feel as if he was facing a gigantic primordial beast that was tens of thousands of feet long. The intimidating pressure made all the divine artifacts in front of him light up, and clanging sounds could be heard when they smashed together. Oomph. A muffled groan rang out from Yun Nuashing's throat, and blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. The pressure in that instant even made him feel the taste of death. Yuan power and spiritual power broke out of his body uncontrollably, and his soul, which had just taken a turn for the better, started to feel weak again. His body, which was sitting cross-legged on the ground, was forcefully pushed back a distance. If not for the protection of the many divine weapons, they would have been sent flying, and a rumbling sound rang out behind them. Big Brother. The muffled groan was clearly heard by Ming and the others, causing their hearts to jump. It was also at this moment that the monstrous pressure suddenly disappeared. The shockwave came and went quickly. However, in that instant, Yun Nuashing, who had withstood the attack, looked as if he had just experienced a great battle. His entire body was drenched in sweat, and his hair was disheveled, making him look extremely miserable. "I'm fine," slowly exhaling. Yun Nuashing gently patted Ming's head, smiled, and turned his head back. The manor had already turned into ruins, and even the walls had been turned into dust. Half of the hall in the middle was gone, and it should be said that there were still ruins left. It was truly inconceivable. That kind of shock wave could even cause a divine underworld expert to vomit blood and die. The ground around them had been left with gullies because of their retreat, and a few pieces of flesh had been dug out from the mountain. The devastating shock wave was still spreading into the distance. In front of him, the land that had long turned into a boundless plain had turned into a stretch of uneven hills. Under the impact of the shock wave, the earth was dislocated, rising and sinking. The space was filled with black cracks. It really looked no different from the end of the world. As the dust dissipated, the enormous Yuyan city seemed to have been hit by an earthquake. Cracks spread out in all directions. More than half of the Yuyan Pavilion, which originally towered at the highest point of Yuyan City, had been destroyed. The other tall buildings in Yuyan City had also been shaved off by the explosion. The remaining buildings had been reduced to dust by the frightening shockwave. Some people were sitting in the ruins of the surrounding houses in Yuyan City. Miserable wails continuously sounded from within the ruins of the surrounding houses. Of course, the destructive power of such a huge spatial shockwave was naturally not only able to destroy half of the city, but the reason why it was not destroyed was because of the golden energy barrier in the air that was like a huge bowl. The huge energy barrier directly enveloped the entire Yuyan city. From the looks of it, it was filled with cracks, and it seemed that it did not feel good to bear the full brunt of the shock wave at such a close distance. Even so, it still managed to protect Yuyan City. Under this shock wave, it seems like the world has changed. Looking at the ruins of Yuyan City and the plains below that had turned into a mountain range, Yun Nuashing could not help but sigh. At this moment, he was not much better off, and his face was slightly pale. Even with a divine artifact, it was impossible for him to bear the full brunt of the shock wave. It should be gone, right? Yu Yin's face was also slightly pale. Although Yun Nuashing had borne the brunt of the shock wave for them, it was impossible for him to bear the full brunt of the shock wave. Just that little bit was already enough to make her feel a little dizzy. In the pitch-black space above Yuyan City, specks of blue slowly appeared. With a rumble, a spherical formation the size of Yuyan City finally appeared before everyone's eyes. The huge formation attracted the attention of the people in Yuyan City once again. Seeing such a huge and profound formation, gasps rang out one after another. Heavens, the formation is reassembling itself. It's a living formation. It's impossible to break through. Even a formation grandmaster might not be able to break through a formation of this level. The formation attracted everyone's attention as soon as it appeared. Countless pairs of eyes were glued to the constantly changing formation, unable to shift their gazes away. Discussions gradually rang out in the sky, slowly converging. The city was filled with a great debate. The hubbub of voices seemed to have forgotten what had just happened. After the formation appeared, the spatial cracks that filled the sky also slowly closed up. The world became calm again. If it were not for the damage seen, anyone would have mistaken what had just happened as a dream. It doesn't seem to have begun. Yin Nuoxing could feel the chaos in Yuyan City from thousands of kilometers away. He bitterly smiled. Just the shattering of the barrier and the appearance of the formation had already caused such a huge commotion. When the purple night dark flames really erupted, just what kind of apocalyptic scene would it be? Fortunately, Senior Jin Wang and the others moved the manor out. I don't have the hobby of admiring fireworks under the fireworks, especially when the fireworks can reward me. Bitterly smiling, Yin Nuoxing could not help but complain, causing Yi Shi and the others to bitterly smile as well. The purple night dark flame is within this formation. In Yuyan City, the Shunming youth casually wiped away the blood at the corner of his mouth. He raised his head and looked at the constantly changing formation. A trace of shock flashed through his eyes. He calmed himself down slightly, turned his gaze, and said to the youth beside him, "Send a message to the sect master and elders. Tell them that the formation sealing the purple night dark flame has already appeared." "Yes," the young man replied respectfully. Then his figure flashed, and he disappeared. Seeing how excited those people were, the Shunming youth frowned. He looked at the formation in the sky, then shook his head and sighed, "Forget it. Let's wait for the elders to come before we plan." This feeling, it is indeed the divinity fluctuation of an emperor god powerhouse. On a distant mountain peak, Yishi looked at the repeatedly changing formation with a bewildered gaze. Her slender eyebrows were tightly knitted together. The purple night, dark flame, ranked 90th already, has the energy of a peak emperor god. Then how powerful is the one ranked higher? Could it be that it can burn people of that level to death? Yin Nuoxing felt his mouth go dry. This was a bit too powerful. It was only ranked 90th, but it was already comparable to an emperor god powerhouse. No, it's the purple night dark flame that's mutated. It's a divine flame that's ranked 90. How could it have such powerful energy? Even some divine underworld powerhouses don't want to collect it. Yishi shook her head. There were a total of 150 divine flames on the divine flame list. Divine flames that had energy comparable to a divine spirit were all ranked at the top of the list. However, the divine emperor was the final barrier between a divine spirit and a divine spirit. How could the 90-ranked purple night dark flame have such power? Mutation? Yin Nuoxing stared blankly for a moment, then shook his head. He didn't know much about these divine flames that were born naturally. He only knew that they all had extremely terrifying energy that had been formed over tens of thousands of years. As for other things, he didn't know. Let me see. A thought suddenly popped up in his mind, and he couldn't get rid of it. Yin Nuoxing nodded. His evil spirit eye quietly revolved. Formation after formation appeared in the void, then floated in front of the pair of resplendent eyes. It slowly rotated, revealing a penetrating energy that made Yishi take a few more glances. What a mystical pair of eyes! Yishi couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. She had just used the evil spirit eye, and she had also heard Yin Nuoxing talk about the effects of the evil spirit eye, which made her somewhat envious. A pair of mystical eyes that could analyze formations was something that countless formation masters yearned for. Even Yi Shi, who was a high-level formation master, couldn't avoid it. With such a pair of eyes, it would be much easier to research and decipher formations. Yin Nuoxing's ability to modify formations came from this. It was something that only a divine-level formation master could do, but it was displayed in the hands of a mortal-level formation master. Yin Nuoxing stuck out his tongue, and his gaze became focused. The formation in front of him flickered a few times toward the spherical region, and he moved his line of sight over there. Then, it flickered once again, and his line of sight actually penetrated the formation. This change made Yin Nuoxing stare blankly. The first time he tried to peek, it seemed that he couldn't see through it. There was always a power within the formation that prevented him from peeking. Perhaps it consumed too much energy when deciphering the formation. Yin Nuoxing casually thought for a moment and nodded. Since the evil spirit I could now penetrate the formation, he couldn't let go of this opportunity. He wanted to be the first person to see the purple night dark flames. Within the spherical formation, purple flames were densely packed. The tumbling sea of flames reverberated throughout the sky, and also sounded like the roars of wild beasts. The blazing energy caused Yin Nuoxing's expression to change slightly. The energy contained within the flames was too frightening, and it made his eyes feel slightly hot. He wasn't there, but his line of sight was looking inside. Despite being so far away, he could actually feel the blazing heat. Within the purple sea of flames, tumbling waves of flames were like a tide, surging over from the end of his line of sight. Layer after layer, they slammed against the formation, and in the end, they formed a 1,000-foot tall wave that slammed against the formation. Every time it tumbled, it would cause the formation to fluctuate, but there were no signs of it shattering. The energy that flowed on the formation made it look indestructible, and even a God Emperor expert would find it hard to shake it. However, the divine flame itself had a destructive power, and under that power that could burn everything, even a God restriction formation would be burnt to a crisp. It was impossible for anything to trap it forever. It had struggled for close to 60 years, and finally, in this year, or perhaps not long after, it would be released. Easily looking into the formation, Yin Nuoxing's evil spirit eyes vision array was activated, increasing his penetrating power by a lot. Passing through the layers of purple flames, Yin Nuoxing slowly searched for the location of the purple night dark flames. Those purple flames that were burning the plains were merely flames released by the origin source flames. The roaring of the purple flames that filled the sky was the only sound in this sealed space. Raising his head to look at the sky, it was also covered by the purple flames. This place was like a purple prison that wanted to imprison anyone who barged in. This won't do. If I go any deeper, my eyes will burn. As Yin Nuoxing's line of sight went deeper, he felt his eyes getting hotter and hotter. Just as Yin Nuoxing's line of sight passed through another layer of flames, he felt the temperature suddenly double, burning his eyes to the point that he couldn't help but tear up. Forcefully blinking his eyes, Yin Nuoxing looked towards the end of his line of sight, but he could only see the depths of the formation. The tumbling sea of flames was like waves rolling over, slamming against the formation in the distance. Forget it. I'll have the chance to see it anyway. It's already not bad that I'm the first to see it. That's right. Shaking his head, Yin Nuoxing sighed in disappointment. His gaze was slightly unresigned as he looked towards the depths of the sea of flames. Perhaps this place was still very far from the center, but just looking at it was already so hot. He really didn't know how it would feel to be there. The formation will be completely burned by the purple night dark flame in less than 3 months. At that time, looking at the formation in the sky, Yin Nuoxing let out a deep sigh. Soon after, he slowly closed his eyes. However, the instant he closed his evil spirit eye, he didn't have time to see that when the layers of flames dispersed, there was actually a temporary vacuum. In the distance, there was a purple cocoon of light. Chapter 163. I have to make full use of my time. The evil spirit I slowly closed as Yin Nuoxing let out a sigh of relief. 3 months of time, a short training session would be enough, and it would be difficult for his strength to have any obvious increase. Of course, Yin Nuoxing did not plan to train until the purple night dark flames erupted. In less than 3 months, that array will be burned to ashes by the purple night dark flames. At that time, Yuyan City will be completely destroyed. We won't even have the power to resist. Yin Nuoxing said indifferently. There was an abnormally terrifying sea of fire inside. If it was released, let alone Yuyan City, everything within a radius of 10,000 miles or even 100,000 miles would be destroyed. 3 months. Hearing this neither long nor short time, Yishi's expression turned grave. They had not even started to prepare anything. Those bee skin scrolls that they had spent a lot of money on seemed to have to be refined into array diagrams. I'm going into seclusion. After you, Een heard the time limit. She nodded with a solemn expression. She rubbed Yin Nuoxing's head with her jade-like hand, then hurriedly turned and walked into the ruined manor. Yin Nuoxing looked at Een with surprise as she disappeared around the corner. She laughed involuntarily. She was usually so carefree. Now, even she said the words seclusion. It seemed like she was not the only one who was anxious. Where are Senior Godly King and the others? Gently stroking the heads of the 2 koalas hanging on his body, Yin Nuoxing turned his gaze. There had been such a big commotion here. How could no one appear? Furthermore, Yao Hua and the others had disappeared without a trace. It couldn't be that they were buried under the ruins, right? Jin Wang and the others have all entered the city. They said they had something to do, Yishi said after thinking for a while. Speaking of which, I have something to do as well. I need to make a trip to Ju Yuan Mountain Villa. Yin Nuoxing suddenly thought of something and raised her head. She seemed to have arranged to meet Shuege and the others at Ju Yuan Mountain Villa half a year ago. However, she did not know if the mountain villa had collapsed after the purple night flames torment. She had seen half of the city turn into ruins from the corner of her eyes earlier. Yin Nuoxing smiled bitterly and scratched her head. She looked down at the 2 koalas and then at Yishi, who was blinking her beautiful wine-red eyes and staring at her. Yin Nuoxing felt a little troubled. Yuyan City, Ju Yuan Mountain Manor. Ju Yuan Mountain Manor was located in the north of the city. It was a little far from the center of the city and was also a little far from the epicenter of the shockwave. However, all the buildings in Yuyan City were basically destroyed by the spatial shockwave. Most of the buildings had collapsed, and the remaining ones were somewhat damaged. However, Ju Yuan Mountain Manor, which was located in a bamboo forest, was completely intact. The smooth walls did not even have a single crack. Such a complete building could no longer be seen in Yuyan City. Today, the Ju Yuan Mountain Villa was bustling with noise. One could hear the noise coming from the Ju Yuan Mountain Villa. Looking through the wall, one could see many young men and old men with half their bodies buried in the ground gathered at the shore, arguing loudly about something. They were arguing until their faces were red and their necks were thick. Among them, one could see the missing Jinshin Wang, the young man from the Serene Flame Pavilion, and the 2 old men from the Starseed Pavilion. Evacuate the ordinary people in Yuyan City first. It's an unwritten rule in the cultivation world that ordinary people should not be harmed in a war. Now that we've encountered a natural disaster like the godly flame, we have to send them out of the city first. Jin Wang glared and roared. Jin Wang is right. This is an unwritten rule. It's not anyone's responsibility, and it's not something that anyone should do. All the god-level experts here have to do their part. The youth from a Serene Flame Pavilion nodded and said lightly, "Now that the array sealing the purple night dark flame has revealed its true form, who knows when the purple night dark flame will erupt? Everyone is in a state of panic. Everyone is in danger. Who would have the time to care about others, especially those unrelated mortals? Taoist Zhao, do you think that you're a god-level expert since you were born? Who here is an AF asterisk king ordinary person? You don't even want to be a human anymore because of some F asterisk king nonsense?" The Fire God King couldn't help but roar when he heard this. His hair stood on end from anger. "Fire God King, you're wrong. Yuyan City is right below the purple night flame. The godly flame has been accumulating for millions of years. Its energy is enough to destroy the heavens and earth. Once it erupts, not to mention those ordinary people, even us and the entire Yuyan city will suffer. Don't tell me that you want to save them one by one. Brother Lu is right. In this world, which place hasn't suffered from the disasters brought by the world of cultivators? If we have to take care of every single one of them, then everyone should be saved and the world will be in chaos. We are not the saviors of the world. Such noble things should be left to the noble people. The old man called Zhao Daozhong stroked his beard and glanced at Fire God King as he said faintly, "If this so-called gathering is just about these boring things, then it can be dismissed. We still have to prepare for ourselves. We won't be playing house with you." Hearing these people dismissing themselves completely, Jin Jinwang felt helpless. The Shunming youth was also speechless. Since the Yuyan Pavilion was located in Yuyan City, they were the guardians in name. If they ignored those ordinary people, their reputation would be ruined. But now, as the guardians, they were powerless. Without the sect master and other senior members, how could they move such a huge Yuyan city with just him and a few Divine King experts? That was why this God's gathering was held. If it weren't for Jin Jinwang and the others, this so-called God's gathering would not have been held. Even if they gathered together, the situation did not improve at all. Although Taoist Zhao's words were harsh, the purple night flame was about to erupt. Everyone was in danger, and no one had the time to care about others. Even the ordinary people in the chaotic Nether Flame City were trying their best to escape from the city. It was a chaotic scene. The Fire God King was enraged. He, who had a fiery temper, couldn't help but curse out loud when he heard how indifferent these people were. The Thunder God King also supported him from the side, confronting Zhao Daozhong and the others. I say, these gods are really boring. On the other side, the remote mahogany corridor where Yun Nuoxing and Shuegu first met was also filled with people. The faint sound of a zither lingered here. Although roars and sounds of fighting could be heard from the heart-gathering lake from time to time, the zither music did not cause the tranquility of this place to fade. Instead, it added an indescribable feeling. If one carefully looked at the people sitting here, they would realize that they were all young talents who had gathered in Yuyan City. They seemed to have followed their elders to Ju Yuan Mountain Villa. Yao Hua listened to the zither music in his left ear and the noise in his right ear. His delicate face had a strange expression as he could not help but complain. Could it be that Jin Jinwang brought them here to listen to their quarrel? In my opinion, what's the point of having so much discussion? If you want to do something, just do it quickly. Isn't it a waste of time to gather here and discuss? Mu Ling played with her hair in boredom. She also had a depressed expression on her face. His gaze shifted to the front of the long corridor. There, a young man in white robes was holding a zither that flickered with the color of starlight. There was a hint of ease on his handsome face. His slender, white, and feminine fingers danced on the zither, releasing waves of pleasant zither music. The faint music quietly dispelled the restlessness that was spreading in this place. That person was Murong Shuegu. She had made an agreement with Yun Nuoxing that they would meet at Juyuan Mountain Villa half a year later after zither was completed. However, Yun Nuoxing was still thousands of miles away at the moment. She did not know how long they had been playing the zither here. The three people sitting below Shuegu were Xueqing, Murong Yufeng, and the others. The four of them were inseparable. When the agreed date arrived, they came here early. Although they did not see Yun Nuoxing, they were not in a hurry. Although they had not known each other for long, they had a certain degree of understanding of his character. He would not stand them up. What do you think if Yusin was here, or little brother Ling Hongjian? What would they do? Huiji withdrew her gaze from the four people and asked casually. Originally, they came over to take a look because they heard the zither music. The others were probably the same. Little sister Yusin would probably throw down a bunch of divine weapons and a magic array, and then clamor to threaten those gods. However, I think she would ignore them a little more, Mu Ling said softly as she covered her mouth and smiled. Speaking of which, where's little brother Ling Hongjian? Why don't I see him? Lei Ming clenched his fist, which was the size of a futon. His body, which was 10 feet tall, leaned against the pillar like a small iron tower. When he spoke, traces of the power of thunder were spat out. Looking at the fluctuating aura, it seemed that he had just advanced. Your house has exploded, and you still have the mood to stay here and chat. Just as Lei Ming's voice fell, a helpless voice came from outside the long corridor. Everyone was stunned. Was he scolding them, or was he scolding them? However, judging from the commotion caused by Purple Night Flame, it seemed that there was no problem with saying that Yao Hua and the others were stunned. When they turned around, they saw a man in a black windbreaker. Their eyes paused, and just as they were about to greet him, their faces suddenly froze. Their mouths were hanging open, and they could not say anything. The others also had strange expressions on their faces. This appearance, what are you looking at? Haven't you seen a handsome man as a babysitter before? Seeing that everyone was looking at him, as if they were dumbfounded, Yun Nuoxing shook his head helplessly. At this time, he had completely turned into a full-time babysitter. The girls were clamoring to come out with him, and he could not refuse. Even if they wanted to come, they could not walk properly and were clamoring for hugs. Yin Nuoxing was speechless. He carried little purple soul on his shoulder, held Ming in his arms, and held Yi Shi in his hand. His appearance was somewhat comical. Brother Yun, you finally, just as he stepped into the mahogany corridor, Shuego, who was at the innermost part of the corridor, seemed to have sensed his presence. Her zither music suddenly stopped, and a smile appeared on her seductive face. Just as she turned around, that smile completely turned into astonishment. Xueqing's beautiful face was also slightly red, and she turned her face away as if she did not know him. Yu Feng and Yu Jing could not help but laugh. If you want to laugh, then laugh. It's not like I forbade you from laughing. Why are you holding it in? Yin Nuoxing rolled his eyes. Under everyone's strange gazes, he walked to the seat 2 meters away from Xueqing and Yao Hua and sat down. He carefully placed the 2 koalas on his body to the side, and only then did he heave a sigh of relief. Yao Hua looked at Yin Nuoxing with a strange gaze. He could not help but reach out to poke him and said softly, "You brought little Ming and little purple soul out. Aren't you afraid that Yusin will beat you up? There's no enmity between us." Why would she beat me up? The 2 little girls insisted on coming out. What can I do? Yin Nuoxing rolled his eyes and said helplessly. This caused Yao Hua and the others to have a strange expression. However, they were not worried about anything. Not many people in Yuyin City dared to provoke this fellow. Even if there were, they would still quarrel in the heart-gathering lake. Looking at Shuege, whose handsome face was brimming with happiness, Yin Nuoxing smiled and said, "Are you guys all right?" Of course, he was referring to the impact of the Purple Night Flame breaking the seal. That kind of terrifying power was something that even gods could not withstand. Shuege and Yao Hua were at the center of the impact. Although they looked fine, it was normal for him to ask about it. Even if I had something to do, I wouldn't be playing the zither leisurely here. However, this is also the last period of peace. Shuege shook her head, and her clear voice was a little depressed. I don't know when the Purple Night Flame will erupt. When that time comes, I'm afraid that even the fate-gathering mountain villa will be destroyed. Young Master Yun, you're a great master of magic arrays. How long do you think the magic array in the sky can last? May Mao turn around. Xueqing smiled and asked casually. However, there was a hint of teasing in her words. That kind of magic array was something that even a master could not see through. Who knows? Maybe half a year, or maybe 3 or 4 months. Maybe it will shatter in the next second. With a boom, Yuyin City will be burned into ashes. That's right. Translator's thoughts Lu_Kaishian, Yin Nuoxing laughed loudly. His voice even had its own sound effects, causing everyone to smile bitterly. Looking at how he was dancing with joy, it would be a waste if he did not become a Dao Inspector. Huh. Shuege laughed loudly and could not help but slap his thigh. The people in the corridor were also amused and chuckled softly. Yin Nuoxing rolled her eyes at him and snatched the black star's zither from his hand. She coughed dryly and gently stroked the zither with both hands. With a soft sound, the zither music once again floated in the mahogany corridor. The kind of tranquil and unique zither music caused the laughter in the corridor to gradually stop. Everyone closed their eyes and listened attentively to this unique zither music. The blazing sun shone its light on the huge magic array, dyeing the golden light blue and faint purple. Then, it shot towards Yuyan City. The frenzy in the magic array and the tranquility in the corridor actually synchronized for an instant. Chapter 164. In the secret chamber, a cocoon of light was suspended in midair, flickering with a bright light like a beating heart. Through the light, one could see a slender figure inside the cocoon. The surging energy surged as the light flickered. One could feel that this cocoon of light was nurturing a powerful life. On the floor of the secret chamber, a magic formation of several feet in size was emitting a gentle light. In the eye of the magic formation, a large pile of colorful crystals lay quietly. The vast energy they emitted poured into the eye of the magic formation and was refined and transmitted out along with the operation of the magic formation. Finally, the energy densely covered the dark secret chamber, which was only a few meters in length and width. The dense energy of heaven and earth also poured in from outside the secret chamber, becoming a small current in this energy sea. Through the gentle light, one could see three small figures sitting cross-legged under the light cocoon. The surrounding energy was constantly pouring into the bodies of the three people and the cocoon. The surging pure energy did not need to be refined at all. It only needed to be slightly operated with a mysterious method to become a part of oneself. It would be dispersed in the limbs and bones, strengthening the bones, muscles, and organs. After parting with Xu Yue and the others in Juyuan Mountain Villa, Yun Nuoxing returned to the dilapidated manor and directly went into seclusion. Before he left, he wanted Xu Yue and the others to come to the High Mountain Villa. Although it was a bit dilapidated, it was at least far away from Yuyan City. In case something happened, they could take care of each other. However, Xu Yue and the others said that they did not need to worry, so he let them go. Yao Hua and the others were still listening to Jin Wang and the others' quarrel in Juyuan Mountain Villa. After listening for a while, Yin Nuoxing also yawned and left. In his opinion, those gods were really bored. If they had the time to quarrel, they should have finished their work of taking refuge. What was more, saving people along the way would not cause them to lose anything. He really did not know whether they were afraid or thinking about something else. While sighing, he also thought of that day when all the gods in Yuyan City fought against the Abyss Temple together. Those gods had disappeared at this moment. Perhaps it was better for them to leave first. If Yin Nuoxing did not come for the Purple Night Dim Flame, she might have followed the others to take refuge in Xingming City. However, they had waited for a year. If they went to the Divine Land empty-handed, they would feel sorry for themselves. Yin Nuoxing was different from ordinary people. If a mortal-ranked cultivator went into seclusion for 3 months, they would probably only be able to increase their strength by 1 transition. However, Yin Nuoxing didn't go into seclusion for the sake of cultivation. Cultivation was just a side benefit. The purpose of his seclusion was to modify the array formation. This was his and Yishi's greatest trump card. The fight for the Purple Night Dark Flame this time would depend on this. One was a pure level 9 of the mortal level, and the other was a level 9 of the Underworld Emperor who had fallen to the mortal level. Yin Nuoxing and Yi, she could only rely on magic circles to resist the gods. With Yishi's attainments in magic circles, it was not a problem for her to resist low-level or mid-level gods. Element Conversion Magic Circle, Energy Condensation Magic Circle, 10,000 Spirits Killing Magic Circle. In the spiritual world, on a boundless grassland, 3 magic formations that were each thousands of feet wide and hundreds of feet wide were flashing with a bright light. Yin Nuoxing floated in the air, and his 6 wings were spread out to 3 feet wide behind him. Countless wind elements were blowing his robe, and his sharp eyes looked at the three magic formations below. He took a deep breath, and his heart gradually calmed down. With a wave of his hand, a huge golden magic circle suddenly broke through the restraints of the void and appeared in front of Yin Nuashing. It overlapped with the magic circles below that were arranged in a triangular shape. Instantly, the bright colors were added to a brilliant golden color. Divine Artifact Magic Circle. Looking at the Divine Artifact Magic Circle, the patterns inside were winding like a huge maze. Beside the eye of the magic circle, there were dozens of empty areas that were slowly rotating around the eye of the magic circle. The transmission of energy in those areas was completely cut off. If there was nothing to fill in, the magic circle would not be able to operate. For people who have many high-level weapons, the Divine Artifact Magic Circle can unleash an unusually strong power. However, for people who don't care about their weapons, this Divine Artifact Magic Circle is useless. Yin Nuashing muttered to himself for a while. This Divine Artifact Magic Circle had some similarities with Yi Shi's 9-Palace Dragon Trapping Magic Circle. Their specific levels were determined by the level of the objects that were deployed. The more powerful the magic circle that was embedded in the 9-Palace Dragon Trapping Magic Circle was, the more powerful it was. As for the Divine Artifact Magic Circle, the higher the level of the weapon that was used as the source of energy, the more powerful it would be. And for Yin Nuashing, who possessed dozens of divine artifacts and a divine weapon, this was undoubtedly a huge help. With his own strength, he would be satisfied if he could use the High Deep Sword to fight against the Divine King powerhouse. However, if he used the Divine Artifact Magic Circle to attack, he was confident that he could use the High Deep Sword to injure a Divine Dark powerhouse. The energy consumption of the Divine Artifact Magic Circle is too great. It is not something that I can bear. However, I can use an energy condensing magic circle to make up for it. I can connect it with the Divine Artifact Magic Circle, but it will hinder the power. Yin Nuashing scratched his head. Only now did he realize that he could not bear the burden of the Divine Artifact Magic Circle. This was a fatal flaw. Although there was an energy condensing magic circle, if he were to deploy 2 magic circles at the same time, in order to make the energy replenishment catch up to the speed of consumption, the range of the condensing magic circle would be huge. In that case, if he were to use 2 giant magic circles at the same time, his soul strength would not be able to keep up. Is there any way to reduce the consumption of the Divine Artifact Magic Circle? Yin Nuashing sighed in distress. He placed a hand on his thigh and held his chin as he couldn't help but mutter to himself. I can combine the condensing magic circle and the elemental conversion magic circle. I can borrow the elemental energy of the world to condense 6 elements. Then, I can use the expansion magic circle to achieve the same level of energy. In addition to the 5 elements I will have 7 elemental energies. In this way, the power consumption will be offset. But I will first have to change the structure of the elemental conversion magic circle. The converted energy must be refined before it can be used. If I don't refine it, I can't use it. The 10,000 spirits killing array has its own refining effect. If I merge the conversion magic circle into the 10,000 spirits killing array, the two will become one. No, the 10,000 spirits killing array has not reached its complete state. Without a complete analysis, it wouldn't be good to casually change it. If I don't change the magic circle, I will insert the condensing magic circle into the elemental conversion magic circle. Then I will stuff it into the incomplete 10,000 spirits killing array. Then I will combine the 3 magic circles into one and connect it to the Divine Artifact Magic Circle. This way, the core of the 4 magic circles will be unstable and the magic circle will collapse. Although there is a magic circle for stability, adding another magic circle seems to be very difficult. At this time, white smoke was coming out of Yin Nuashing's head. His face was flushed red, and he gritted his teeth. He glared at each other, and he looked flustered and exasperated. However, it was complicated to explain. In fact, he just wanted to make up for the problem of the divine artifact magic circle's consumption without losing its power. Modification and connection. What should I do? His hand grabbed his long hair in distress. Soon, his hair was disheveled, and he looked very embarrassed. Sitting down in the sky, Yun Nuashing crossed his arms and frowned. He took a few deep breaths and slowly exhaled, calming himself down. After doing this a few times, his beautiful face no longer had any trace of anxiety or irritation. Instead, it was as calm as water and as firm as a rock. His evil spirit eye slowly opened, and the resplendent five-colored eyes swept across the 4 magic circles below. After thinking for a while, he took out the elemental conversion magic circle. The evil spirit eye operated to the extreme, and palm-sized magic circles floated out from the void. They shrunk in front of his eyes and slowly rotated. Looking at the core of the elemental conversion magic circle, the evil spirit eye shrunk slightly and began to analyze the large and complex energy patterns. However, the elemental conversion magic circle was made by him, so the analysis was much faster. In less than 2 hours, the dazzling core appeared before his eyes. Looking at the countless thin threads extending from the core, Yun Nuashing swallowed his saliva. Staring at the core that was only the size of a fingernail, he began the most difficult part of the magic circle reconstruction. Modification. In fact, Yun Nuashing had his reasons for doing this. This was because the connection of magic circles was very taxing on one's mind. Furthermore, without any special methods, it could not be maintained. However, the reorganization and modification of magic circles were different. It was equivalent to creating a new kind of magic circle. Once it was successful, it would be engraved in one's mind. The next time it was used, it could be used again. It was easier to use compared to the elemental conversion magic circle. However, it was many times more complicated, and the difficulty was also many times higher. It's only 4 magic circles. I don't believe that I can combine them. Letting out a fierce roar, Yun Nuashing opened his evil spirit eye. Dozens of extremely thin threads shot out from the magic circle before him. They carefully avoided the threads extending from the core and wrapped around the tiny core. Instantly, countless amounts of information turned into a torrential sea and directly fed back into Yun Nuashing's mind. They fiercely crashed into him, causing his mind to be turned upside down, and he almost fainted. How is this a flow of information? This is an ocean. Yun Nuashing's hands suddenly covered his head. He felt dizziness and pain in his head, and his vision was a little blurry. He could not help but bitterly smile. With just one contact, he almost fainted. This was only the elemental conversion magic circle. If he were to use the 10,000 spirits killing array, he would probably be unconscious for a few days. Shaking his head, he quickly organized the information that was fed back to him. He carefully controlled the evil spirit eye to obtain another portion of information and organize it again. Repeating this process over and over again, Yun Nuashing spent almost half a day before he finally finished gathering all the information. He was a little dizzy from the series of extremely small runes and talismans that were densely packed together to form a large magic circle. This was not the first time he was so close to a magic circle. However, every time he let his mind enter the magic circle, he would be fiercely shocked. Swimming in the sea of information, he was like a tiny speck of dust. His fingers constantly drew out runes and talismans and then condensed them on their own to weave out another small rune. He placed it in its original position, replacing the part that was thrown out, and then moved it to another location, repeating this long and tedious process. The actions that were carried out in his mind were also fed back to the core by the evil spirit eye. The core was reorganized and modified. At the same time, the magic circle that had shrunk to about 10 feet in size was also slowly wriggling, adjusting and changing according to the information that was transmitted from the core. Although Yun Nuashing felt that his speed was already quite fast, with the small figure formed from his soul force constantly changing the arrangement of the runes and rearranging them, He did not expect that this piece of elemental conversion magic circle would take him an entire month to complete. When the pair of eyes that flickered with a myriad of colors slowly opened, the magic circle in front of him suddenly emitted a clear, buzzing sound. Following that, it slowly started to revolve. From the surrounding heaven and earth energy, strands of gold, green, blue, red, and brown energy were slowly drawn out, condensing on the mysterious magic circle. However, there was no further movement. Yin Nuashing nodded. With a thought, the 5 different colored energy surged into the magic circle, passing through from the other side. When it came out again, it had already turned into a dazzling golden energy, emitting a dazzling radiance. With a thought, the golden energy that had condensed to the size of a palm suddenly turned into a golden pillar of light. It shot out explosively, drawing a golden line in the sky. The light element energy surged, dispersing some of the fog in the distance. It's a success. I'm so tired. Looking at the energy pillar that shot out into the distance, Yin Nuashing's face that had not changed for the past month stiffened. He let out a long sigh of relief. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.